I don't know how I'm going to handle this, Don Venuto said to his capo and best friend. If you can't change your boy to be like other boys, then simply change the other boys to be more like your boy, Capo de Mazzo said in that low soft-spoken gravely voice of his. His Don Venuto, had asked what to do about his son and, more importantly, the rumors about his son from those other boys. And there was that teasing as well. You might not want to say it out loud, but Don Venuto's son Mario was a sissy. A effeminato giovanetto, or effeminate boy with little if any masculine qualities. A piccolo ragazza, or little girl, according to one of the Don's soldiers who whispered that only once. A comment to someone else along with a snicker. A comment made a day before that soldier was found floating face down near Pier 7 by the edge of the bridge. At least that was the rumor that started spreading around among the locals and a few of those boys who teased Mario. So the Don, as much as he loved his son and tried understanding him, simply couldn't at first. What made it worse were the growing rumors and the embarrassment those rumors were causing him. That was his frustration, and that was what drove the question he posed to his capo as they shared a glass of wine late into the night. For Capo de Mazzo there was an easy solution, as he answered, semplice. Not so simple, the Don answered. It is. You are Don Venuto. For the Don, many things are simple, Capo de Mazzo said, laughing as he lifted his glass and added, salutaire. Salute, my friend. Now tell me how I can make this simple? Don Venuto asked. Compleanno partito, Capo de Mazzo said with a smile. A birthday party? You are not making any sense, my friend, Don Venuto said, smiling at the man smiling back. His friend was a wise man, so the Don knew he'd get an explanation. A little girl's birthday party, but no girls. Just for the boys. For all of the boys, Capo de Mazzo said, laughing as he added, Capire? Capri? No, I don't understand. A little girl's birthday party without little girls doesn't make any sense, Don Venuto said, and then paused. It was clear by the change in his face that he suddenly understood as he added, Si. Giovanetto cum piccolo ragazza. Buono. Genio mio camerata. Salutaire. Yes. Boys as little girls? Good. You truly are a genius, my friend. Salute. Salutaire, Capo de Mazzo said as he lifted his glass with the Dons. The 5 lieutenants stood quietly in front of the Don's desk. Their Capo de Mazzo had called them earlier that day, simply saying to each, Casa. Veni. Volare. House. Come. Hurry. It meant come to Don Venuto's and don't stop on the way. None of those standing there knew the woman sitting by the fireplace. This is Ms. Rosa Capella. She specializes in little girl birthday parties. She is helping me with a party, and I want you and your men to hand out the invitations when she gets them ready. I want those invitations handed, in person, to every mother of every boy that lives in this neighborhood and goes to school with my son, Don Venuto said. The men nodded. It didn't matter that some of them didn't understand or that a few wondered over why, just that they did what they were told to do. Their orders, like most orders from the Don, were to be carried out, and carry them out they would, and they were ordered to make those boys an offer. An offer that none of them could refuse. The 5 men smiled. That was the story that would eventually spread around the school. No one knew where that story came from, but then again, it didn't matter. There was a godfather and he was not happy. That was the part everyone understood. That was the part the boys understood that day they walked home. Carol Evans wiped her hands on the dishcloth before turning towards the door. Her son Mark, already coming down the hall, was interrupted as she said, "You go finish that math, mister. I'll get the door." "Mom," Mark said, freezing in his tracks, but couldn't do so without making his frustration known. Mark was in his room again, but against the door, trying desperately to hear what was said by whoever was at the door. Mark was hoping for any reason to not finish his math. "Mark!" Mark's mother Carol yelled. "What?" Mark said happily, given it was her now interrupting his math. "Come in here," Carol said, sounding serious. "What's up?" Mark asked, then grew quiet at the look on his mother's face. It was nearly white. Pale. It made Mark pause and add, "Mom? What's the matter? It's an invitation to a birthday party?" Mark's mother said. "From whom?" Mark asked, now seeing the pink envelope in her hand. Why an invitation to a birthday party made her look like that seemed odd. It doesn't say from whom, but clearly it's from Don Venuto. Those were his men that delivered it, Carol said quietly as she sat hard on the ottoman in front of his father's old chair. Everyone in that neighborhood knew who the Don was now, and most of his men, or at least the types of men that might work for the Don. "For who then?" "Me?" Mark asked. "It's for you." That much those men delivering it made clear as well. Carol said. "But you don't know whose party it is then? Is it for his son?" Mark asked, growing curious over his mother's concern and that connection to the Don. "Honey, I'm not sure. Come here and sit," Mark's mother said. Mark didn't hesitate. He knew his mother's moods, and this one she was suddenly and scared him. Mark knew of the Don's son, and the rumors about that man the police fished out of the river a few days ago. "Mom, what's the matter?" Mark asked with real concern. "Honey, this invitation is for you to go to a birthday party," Carol said. "Okay, so?" Mark added. "So, it's a girl's birthday party, but there won't be any girls there," Carol said. "I don't get it," Mark asked. "Honey, those men said that it's a little girl's birthday party, but not, because it's a costume party and only for boys. All of the boys in the neighborhood, as a matter of fact, and you'll all be going dressed as girls." "Little girls," Carol said. "What are you saying?" Mark asked, suddenly very confused. "Honey, have you been teasing this man Don Venuto's son?" Carol asked. "Me? No. Honestly, Mom, I know better. I guess some of the boys do, but not to his face since that man was found. Some of the guys, in fact, said that's the reason that man ended up in the river," Mark said in a panic. He hadn't teased Mario, but he knew that some of the boys did. "Why?" Mark said. "Because that was the reason those men hinted at. Evidently the Don has decided that all of the boys are going to be sissies for at least one day, and that's the reason for this little girl's birthday party. You've got to go dressed as a little girl," Carol said. "Not me," Mark said flatly, but knowing full well he didn't dare not go. Not if he knew what was good for him, and he had an image of that man floating face down near the rocks by Pier 7. "You've got no choice." "I don't have a choice," Mark's mother said, and added almost in tears, "You must go, and you're going dressed as a little girl." "Mom, what if this is a joke or something?" Mark said. "And what if it isn't?" his mother noted. "I'm going to call a couple of the guys," Mark said. "Use your cell phone to call your friends and see if they've got invitations, and I'll call a couple of the moms," Mark's mother said. It only took about 20 minutes to call most of the guys Mark knew, and what Mark discovered was they too had invitations. Mark's mother also confirmed that, so far, every mother of every son had been given their invitations personally and told the same thing. Everyone was in a mild state of shock. Everyone had an invitation, and it was clear that everyone was going. Everyone was going because it was also clear that anyone not going would, according to those men who delivered those invitations, would be missed. "What do we do now?" Mark asked, looking at his mother when she hung up the phone. "Are you kidding? Honey, you're going to that party?" Carol asked. Mark already knew that. Mark knew that when he'd hung up on Chuck, which was after he'd talked with Ralph, Stan, and Jack. They too were going, and going as girls. They all were. There was no doubt about that. What Mark was really asking was what he'd have to wear. The phone rang again, making Mark jump this time. He dreaded picking it up, but did. "Mom. It's a Ms. Rosa Capella? She says she needs to talk with you," Mark said after picking up the phone just a short time later. "She'll be here in a second," Mark said to the woman on the other end of the line. "Hello?" Mark's mother said, taking up the phone Mark was still holding. Mark stood nearby. "Yes? Yes, I know, we got the invitation this afternoon." "Yes, he's going." "Yes, he will be dressed." "You're coordinating the party?" "I see." "Yes, I was going to shop for something." "Well, I don't know what yet." "I suppose a dress, obviously." "No, I hadn't thought about it much." "Okay, hold on and I'll get a pencil," Mark's mother said, motioning for Mark to get her a pencil and paper. "What's the name of it?" "Okay, Little Miss Muffin Boutique." "Muffin as in the spider." "Okay, I've got that." "What? Why?" "No, I don't understand that part at all." "Okay, this is now getting a bit ridiculous." "Does he have a choice?" "No, I didn't say no, of course he'll do it." "Yes, I know who that man is, but that doesn't give him the right to push us around like that." "I know you're not the one doing this, but obviously you're taking orders from him." "And the other boys? Are the other boys going to be wearing the same things?" "So he's paying for it?" "No, I didn't know that." "And I can get everything there then?" "I suppose I have to, right?" "I mean, my son doesn't have much choice in this, obviously." "Well, you can tell him for me that I think he's being a bully." "Good day to you two," Mark's mother said, slamming the phone down. "What?" Mark asked. He'd gotten some of the conversation, but there were a lot of gaps. That woman is coordinating the party. Evidently the Don is paying for the things you and the other boys will be wearing. He's set up an account at this place called the Little Miss Muffin Boutique. They are supposed to have shoes, dresses, and accessories. Mark's mother said as she looked at the paper with the name and address on it. "So we don't have to pay for any of it at least?" Mark said, not sure if that made a difference or not, but growing suspicious that it wasn't all of it as his mother looked up. The look on her face suggested it and made him add, "What?" "Honey, according to that woman, the Don wants all of the boys to be wearing panties as well as their little dresses," Carol said, deciding not to try and find a better way to say it. "Panties? As in girls' panties?" "You've got to be kidding," Mark said. "I wish I was. I wish I could give that man a piece of my mind," Carol said. Mark fell back on the couch heavily. This was going from bad to worse. "Panties?" Mark said. "We'll have to go tomorrow." The party is Saturday, Carol said as she patted Mark on his knee. Panties? Mark repeated. I'm afraid so, Carol said in a sympathetic voice. Mark groaned. They found the place, but neither were prepared for what greeted them. Little Miss Muffin Boutique wasn't exactly a boutique. Not a quaint little shop for girls as Carol had suspected, but a full-blown store that made her wish, for a moment at least, that she had a girl. She hid that part as she urged Mark past the door he'd opened for her. M.O.M. Mark whispered as they slowed and stopped just inside the store. A hint of what waited inside was in the windows, and what was in the windows were mannequins in dresses clearly meant for pageants. Clearly for little girl pageants, since those mannequins were little. Pinks, lavenders, lace, bows and ruffles everywhere, and everywhere something girlish and feminine. There was nothing in that store for boys. Dresses upon dresses in racks that looked like they covered every pastel color imagined, and to the left, past the jewelry and makeup counters, lingerie that Mark only glanced at. To his right, shoes, and in front of him, going all the way to the back, more dresses. Rows of them as he stood frozen in place. This was not a clothing store for girls, this was Mark's worst nightmare. Can I help you? The woman asked. I'm Mrs. Evans, Carol Evans. I'm here with my son Mark. I understand we should have an account set up for us for a costume party? Carol said, looking around the woman at the racks of dresses that were giving her goosebumps. She could only imagine what it was doing to Mark. Of course. You'll be one of Ms. Rosa Capella's boys then? Please, follow me and I'll do a quick verification on the list I was given and then guide you through our selections. I'm Helen. Helen Andrews, but please call me Helen. Helen said. Thank you, Carol said as she fell in behind the woman now walking towards the back of the store. Mark didn't want to follow, and the only reason he did was to stay within the protection of his mother as those girls already in the store began taking notice. Has there been any other boys in yet? Carol asked. Actually, we have one boy trying on dresses at this very moment and 2 others were in earlier. This is going to be quite a costume party, I'm told. Imagine how wonderful it's going to be for these boys to get to go through this sort of experience. Helen said. Imagine. Carol said as she added, Can you tell me the name of the boy already here? Ralph Summers the first, believe. He's in changing room 3. That's the middle one's over there next to the mirrors. Helen said as she moved behind the counter. She picked up a metal box, thumbed through the cards, alphabetized, and found Mark under M. Helen pulled the card as she said, Ah, here we are. Mark. Just let me initial this and then we can look over your selections. Ralph. Here? Mark asked. Seems so. Mark's mother noted, nodding over at the changing room. Mark almost fainted dead away as his schoolmate appeared. There was no mistaking Ralph as a boy, but he was wearing a gathered ruffled lemon yellow dress. What made it funny in a way was his regular boy-style black shoes and socks and the t-shirt he still wore. What didn't make it funny was that Mark saw himself doing that very same thing. Dresses first, I suspect, since everything will coordinate around the dress. Helen said as she pulled a sewing tape measure from around her neck as she added, Let me get his shoulder, chest and waist measurements for his size. Mark held his arms at his side for the shoulder measurements, then held his arms out for his chest and waist. Size 7, remarkable. Helen said as she wrote that down on the card with Mark's name on it. Remarkable? Carol asked. Size 7 is a delightful size. We have a fairly substantial selection of dresses in size 7. Helen said. Oh joy! Mark said sarcastically. Why don't we start with our pageant styles first, then you can, if you don't find something there, move to our bridal or formal sections. Helen noted with a gesture of her hand. That would be great, Carol said. Mark said, wishing she didn't sound so enthusiastic. Honey, relax. It's just being conversational, Carol said and added, look, you're not the first and definitely not the last, and Ralph there is also here, so try and relax. Relax? Mom, we are buying a dress for me to wear to a birthday party. Hello? Mark said. I know. Can't be helped, honey, Carol said, fighting the smile she felt creeping up on her. In spite of Mark's dilemma, she was beginning to sense this as more fun than not. No, Mark whispered as they came up to a rack of dresses Mark didn't even want to look at. Honey, there are no simple dresses in here. Look, we can spend time looking here and finding something quickly, or we can spend time looking around, Carol said. No. Let's just get something and go, Mark said, not wanting to stay any longer than necessary. He saw Ralph and Ralph saw him. Both boys dropped their eyes as Mark added, grab one quick and let's go. These are our size 7s. We've got several styles, with the ones on the left our fullest. If it were me, I'd go with those only because he can wear the bouffant slips and not the petticoats. The petticoats tend to slip down when they play. I suspect they will be playing? Helen asked. To be honest, I'm not sure, but the full slips do make sense, Carol noted. Slips? Mark said. All of our dresses are going to require a slip of one sort or another, and the color is going to dictate the panties, Helen said and added, same with shoes if you don't go with the basic Mary Jane. We've got those in a patent white and in black. Panties? Mark whispered. All of our dresses come with costume-designed panties, Helen said. I'm going to run away if you don't hurry, Mark said in anguish. You'll do nothing of the sort. Now stop. You think this is easy for me? Carol said, fighting back the smile that she was fighting desperately to hide. You're not going to be wearing this stuff, Mark said. It could be worse, Mark's mother said. How? Mark asked. It's for a party. What if Don Venuto had decided you guys wear these things to school or something? Carol noted. That would be worse, Mark said. You even care which color? Carol asked. Are you kidding? Mark said. Didn't think so. Okay, so let's go with pink, white, and maybe yellow, Carol said. 3? Why 3? Mark asked in a panic as he watched Ralph being turned by his mother in front of the mirror. Okay, just the pink one then. This one, Mark's mother said, lifting a pink confection from the rack. Excellent choice. That's one of our best, Helen said, delighted. So what does this one need in the way of slips? Mark's mother asked. Come on and I'll show you your choices, Helen said as she turned towards the lingerie and added, our panties are near there as well. Mark followed closely, trying not to look at the girls now watching this unfold. Some were watching in amazement at Ralph already. Mark also tried not listening to the dress his mother carried as it rustled loudly. All of these slips are styled for that particular dress, Helen said as they reached the lingerie. A girl and her mother looking through panties in a large pastel lemon bin paused to wonder over the boy following the woman holding a dress. The girl smiled oddly, the mother simply watched as Helen added, here we go, size 7. Mark's mom lifted the slip and it too joined the dress, and the rustling grew louder in Mark's ears. Ears that felt like they were on fire around the edges as he flushed more. Why did the store have so many girls in it, he mused in anguish. Ralph was gone when Mark looked, and Mark looked because it was his turn to face that next humiliating step. Ready? Mark's mother asked. No. Mark said. Would you rather wait a bit? Perhaps look around some? Mark's mother asked softly. Another girl over in a sea of white dresses under a large gold cross was also looking at him. Can we do this some other time? Mark asked. Sure. I mean, we've got one more day to shop before the party. Honey, you realize that another day isn't going to make this any easier or change things. Mark's mother said. I know. Mark said softly with resignation in his voice. So? Mark's mother asked. Fine. Mark said and added, you go first, I'll follow. Mark was definitely the center of attention as far as the girls' shopping were concerned. At least till Ralph stepped out of the changing room again, this time without his t-shirt at least, and this time in a soft pastel green dress. Mark and Ralph looked at each other like men condemned, which only changed a little when Steve walked into the store with his mother. Steve! Ralph said to Mark, nodding towards the direction of the front of the store. Mark's back was to the doors, but he used the mirror and nodded. Safety in numbers, Mark thought. Steve's face mirrored the other two boys. Mark was suddenly glad he was at least this far, and clearly Ralph was just as glad. Hi, Carol. Ralph's mother said, coming out of the changing room holding the lemon yellow dress, as she added, Isn't this wild? That's a word. This has got to be the most unusual day I've had in recent memory. Carol said, taking Sandy's hand. Ralph is a size 8. Sandy said proudly. 7 for Mark. Carol said, sounding as if she too was bragging. Really? How sweet this is. Sandy said before turning back to her son Ralph, as she added, Mirror, honey. Mom, this one fits. Ralph said. Mirror. Sandy said again, pointing to the large mirror set against the wall. Mom, why do I need to try it on? Can't we just take this stuff home? Mark said impatiently. He wanted to get out of there. He didn't want to wear the dress, not there, not in front of a growing audience of girls and their mothers who were no longer looking on covertly. It's got to fit. Look, honey, we've got to do this, so just try hanging on, okay? Mark's mother said as she transferred the slip to the arm holding the dress so she could pat Mark's shoulder, as she added, Besides, we've still got to get your shoes. Oh, this is so wrong. Mark said. I know, honey. I just wish you boys hadn't teased that poor boy. Perhaps this wouldn't have been necessary. Mark's mother said. I didn't, never did. Mark said, sounding frustrated. Did you ever try and stop any of the other boys from teasing? Mark's mother asked. No? Mark said. That might have made the difference. Oh well, that's water under the bridge now. Come on and let's get this over with. Mark's mother said, nodding to Sandy, who nodded back. I asked Ralph the same question. Seems to me that if only a couple of them had stepped in just once, this wouldn't be necessary now. Sandy said. Brother's keeper. Mark's mother said with resignation in her voice. Mom? Mark said at the threshold of the changing room. Exactly. Sandy said as she moved off with her son for those mirrors, while adding, Do you like this one, honey? I think I'd rather see you in the puffy sleeves rather than straps. Mark entered the soft bubble-gum pink room and found himself surrounded by more mirrors, less the area on the door to hang the dresses. "Clothes," Mark's mother said. Mark started to undress. Slowly, painfully if you read his face as his mother eased the slip from its hanger. It was strapped to the satiny bodice that flowed easily to a grouping of petticoats as full as the dress. The rustling never stopped, Mark noted. "Why can't they make this more quiet?" Mark asked as he stepped out of his jeans. "Well, for one thing this is taffeta, honey, and most taffetas rustle. For another thing this is something we sort of enjoy. A kind of spotlight, if you will. Feeds a little into our senses when we're feeling pretty." Mark's mother said, smiling apologetically as she added, "It's a girl thing." Mark was silent as he lifted his t-shirt off, laying it now with his jeans. "Life your arms, honey," Mark's mother said as she gathered the slip. It was the same sound as the trees in fall next to his window or when he gathered them for the bag after raking the yard. Mark saw the tiny bow in pink attached to the slip's front just below the delicate lace added to the edges. The fabric of the top shimmered in the light. "Why so many layers?" Mark asked for want of something to keep his mind off what was happening. "One layer, the softest, rest against your legs so the tulle doesn't tickle them. The middle layer is netting to give the slip body and make the dress flare out, and the top layer is silky smooth like it is so the dress slides over it," Mark's mother said, fighting that smile again. Her hands were shaking slightly as she eased the slip over her son's head. Carol fought all sorts of urges, some of which to hug her son for the sake of his anguish, some of it to hug her pretend daughter just for the joy of it. That urge came on her as a thought as the slip fell around him. This had to be the most delightful day she'd had in a long time. Imagining what it would be like having a girl was being answered in these seconds. "How's it feel?" Mark's mother asked. "Feel? It feels gross." "How is it supposed to feel?" Mark said in anger as the slip settled around him. That wasn't exactly true, but he wasn't going to admit to any of that. "No, honey, I mean fit? Is it tight or too loose?" Mark's mother asked. "Fine. It fits me just fine," Mark said in frustration as he pulled his hands up. He'd lowered them and instantly they fell into the folds of the slip. He didn't want to touch it. Yet, for a second, a very brief moment he did. He had. He couldn't help himself, but he wasn't going there, he decided. "Dress," Mark's mother said as she began setting the dress up for Mark to wear. It buttoned down the back from the neck and like the slip, there was more than one layer under the skirts. At least two at the top. Mark wasn't sure. "Is that the same stuff as the slip?" Mark asked simply because the dress was also rustling. It was almost, but the taffeta in a pink was almost the same color as the room but covered in a blush organdy that softened the sparkle of the dress. Under the skirt another layer of taffeta, his mother said, so it would be just as slippery as the skirts of his slip. "I love these gathers," Mark's mother said, forgetting that Mark might not. The dress was gathered in what was clearly more panels or gores than necessary, which was reason enough for the slip. The organza skirt sitting on top of the taffeta skirt gathered a little bit more. The satiny top ended in puffy sleeves that were edged in the same satiny material, but see though from the pit of the arm to that edging. "Extremely puffed," his mother noted happily. "Arms again," Mark's mother said. Mark had ignored her remark about those gathers. She could love every bit of that dress but not Mark, Mark decided as he lifted his arms. The puffed sleeves tugged at his elbows as they began clinging to his upper arms. The dress itself fell past his face and onto the slip as his mother fluffed it free to set on top. The weight of the dress pressed Mark's slips against his legs as the nylon lining of the top slid over the nylon of the slip. It suddenly dawned on Mark why they were called slips, and the dress moved easily over it. "Do you guys really like this stuff?" Mark asked as the dress and slip rustled loudly. Carol began fussing with his puff sleeves so they sat even. It was nearly a perfect fit, and Carol swooned over the look of it on her son. If he had long hair at the moment, it would have been nearly perfect. "Of course. This is what being a girl is all about, honey," Mark's mother said, ignoring how the words might sound to Mark. "Do you? I mean, do you get different when you wear the fancy stuff?" Mark asked for no other reason than to ease his discomfort and another urge flowing under that. Mark couldn't help but acknowledge the feel of it at some level, and that came again when he moved a leg. The taffeta resting against the skin above his knee registered the sensation, and his knees, front and back, did the same. There was also that movement over his chest and back. Feminine. That's the word you're looking for, honey, and yes, we get very girlish when we get to wear stuff like this. The prettier the better for most of us. I don't suppose that's going to make any sense for you though, is it? Mark's mother said. Do you think Don Venuto's son feels this the same way a girl does? Mark asked. Do you think he dresses like this? Mark's mother asked. I don't know. I mean, he kind of moves like a girl does. You know, sort of sissy or something. Mark said. He was born that way, but it doesn't necessarily mean he is that way? Mark's mother said. Sissy? Mark said. Being effeminate doesn't mean he wants to be a girl. It just means he's effeminate. Not a fair word to use for a boy, even if it seems true. He might be more macho than you even. Mark's mother said. Not likely. Mom, he throws a ball like a girl does. Mark said, remember gym class. That's just physical. Imagine you now, dressed like this. I mean, technically. You being a boy wearing a dress makes you a sissy then, right? Mark's mother said. But I'm not doing this because I like it? Mark said. And what if he's not doing it because he likes it? What if he can't help it? Mark's mother asked. Not the same. Mark said. Well, not exactly the same, but then again, it is only in the senses. I mean, you now can't help the way you look either, right? Mark's mother asked. That's for sure. Mark said. And those girls out there looking at you. Made you uncomfortable, didn't it? Mark's mother asked. Definitely. Mark said. So, in a way you're kind of sharing the same feelings that boy has, I'll bet. Only you don't have to do this every day, and he does. Mark's mother noted. That would be so tough. Mark said. I'd say that's most likely true. Now turn around so I can button this up. Mark's mother said, smiling. Her son was catching on. She mused. It fits. Mark said, not seeing the point of buttoning the dress. Not until it's closed around you, honey. Mark's mother said as she began closing the buttons. Mark was silent, standing there with his mother at his back. He was facing the far mirror and avoiding the look of the dress that now hid the slips under it. It flared past the distance of a doorway, and Mark wondered over that, imagining moving around the living room and not hitting anything sitting on tables. How do you move in these things? Mark asked. Move? Mark's mother asked as she reached the last button above Mark's bottom. You know, how do you keep from hitting things? Mark asked and added, with the skirt out like it is? You get used to wearing these things and aware of the distance. Put your arms down over your skirts. Mark's mother said. Why? Mark asked, standing there with his arms folded against his chest. Going to show you a trick we girls learn. Mark's mother said. Mark lowered his hands into the folds of his dress and didn't lose the feeling that rose up in him as his fingers touched the organdy that flowed over them. Now what? Mark asked, feeling uncomfortable over the feelings he had. When you are wearing a dress like this, you can sort of feel how far out it is with your hands. Notice how they are resting at an angle? Sort of like walking with something wide in those hands, so you know pretty much where the edge is. Can you sense that? Mark's mother asked. Yes, sort of, I guess. Mark said. Anyway, you get a feel for it after a time in these things. Mark's mother noted with a smile. Okay, so it fits. Mark said, glad to be past this part. Hold on, I need to tie the sash before you step out. Mark's mother said. Step out? Mom, I don't need to step out. I'm not trying on any more dresses and I don't care what this looks like on. Besides, we've got mirror in here. Mark said. All part of the process. Mark's mother said. Process? Mark repeated. Honey, in a way this is sort of a lesson, or at least I think it is. I think that Dawn is making a point having you guys all doing this, and what's the point of it if you don't go through all of the steps? Carol said. You think this is right? Mark asked. I'm not sure. I didn't at first, but I'm thinking, as bad as it is for you guys, it's a pretty good way of showing you what it's like to be scorned, laughed at, and teased over something you have no control over. Right? Mark's mother asked. I guess so, but it doesn't make it right. Mark said. Probably not, but we can't change that, and there are still these steps to get through. Besides, you still need shoes. Mark's mother said and added, and the panties to match. Mom, how are they going to know I'm not wearing panties? Mark asked. I think, given what I know of the Don so far, that he's going to know one way or another. Mark's mother said. Mom, I don't understand that part at all. Mark said. Me neither. I suppose it's another part of this humiliation the Don wants you guys to go through, and frankly, I don't think that part is fair either. That part? You think this part is fair? Mark asked as his mother fused with the long strip of sash she was fashioning into a giant bow at the small of his back. In some ways, yes, if you want to know the truth. Mark's mother said. Thanks. Mark said sarcastically. I said in some ways. Mark's mother said before adding, there. Now, let's go into the light and see how this looks. Do we have to? Mark asked, thinking of Ralph and how he looked standing there in the middle of that store with those girls looking on. Afraid so. Mark's mother said as she moved to the swinging doors. Mom, wait. Mark said, looking anguish over the prospects of going out there as Ralph had. His mother assumed he was nervous about stepping out of the changing room. Honey, what if I told you that everyone in that store already knows why you're here? Mark's mother said, smiling at her son. No, they don't. Those girls think I'm some kind of sissy. Mark said. Actually, the woman that helped us said just the opposite. She said that you boys, the ones she's helped already at least, are really quite brave for doing this. She also said that the other sales ladies know, obviously, and so do most of the girls out there waiting. Mark's mother said. No, she didn't. Mark said defiantly. Honey, I'm just telling you what she said. Really? She said that? Mark asked. That's what she told me when she was pulling that card out. That's also when she said that the girls, at least some of them, know what was going on. Mark's mother said. So they don't think we're sissies then? Mark asked. Nope. And why would they? I mean, you are going to a costume party. Honey, this isn't all that much different if you were getting that dress for Halloween. Mark's mother said with a wave of her hand. I wouldn't wear this stuff even for Halloween. Mark said with conviction. Not even if I'd asked you to? Mark's mother said. Would you? Mark asked, suddenly curious. If I thought I could get away with it? Yes. Mark's mother noted with a smile. You're serious? Mark asked. Absolutely. Mark's mother noted. Mom? Mark asked, but in a subdued voice. What, honey? Mark's mother asked, also changing her tone. Do you ever wish you'd had a girl? Mark asked. Heavens no! Not for a minute. Mark's mother said. Never? Mark asked, smiling slightly. Okay, perhaps in the beginning, but only because you had gotten so many pretty things before you were born. Mark's mother noted. Pretty things? Like what? Mark asked curiously. Dresses, sweetheart. About half of the clothes you got were dresses of one sort or another. Mark's mother said. You're kidding? Mark said. Not really. Some of the women gave me dresses. Mark's mother said. What did you do with them? Mark asked, looking at his mother with a curious face. I gave them away. Mark's mother answered but smiled. You dressed me up, didn't you? Mark said. Okay, a few times, but that was simply for curiosity's sake and you were a baby. Mark's mother said. Really? Mark asked, feeling odd over that confession and not really expecting it. Every mother does that at one time or another. Mark's mother said. So you didn't want a girl? Mark asked. I did and I didn't. Was simply hoping for a baby that had all of his toes and fingers. Mark's mother said, laughing, and added, besides, at the moment, I'm pretending you are your brother's twin sister. M.O.M. Mark said, protesting that joke she just made. Honey, will you relax a little? Goodness gracious. This can't be that bad, now can it? Mark's mother asked. Bad enough. Mark said, but he said it smiling. Does that smile mean just a little then? Mark's mother asked. I'm not admitting to anything. Mark said. Good enough. Now what say we do the mirror thing? Mark's mother noted. And those girls. Those girls out there know I'm doing this for a party and not because I'm some sort of sissy boy? Mark asked as his mother pushed the door open. That's what I've been told. Mark's mother said as she stood by the door waiting for Mark to walk out. Mom, wait. Mark said. What now, honey? Mark's mother asked. I'm wearing guys' shoes and socks. Mark said, suddenly feeling odd in his own shoes. Ralph looked silly in his t-shirt, shoes, and socks. Actually, Mark thought it looked worse or even more sissy for some reason. Would you like to wear the shoes first? Mark's mother asked. Yes. Mark said. Okay, wait here and let me see what they've got. Mark's mother said as she stepped out of the room. Mark took that moment to turn towards the mirror at his left, which reflected the back of his dress from the other mirror. His mom was gone for some number of minutes and Mark took that time to admire or at least look at his outfit in more detail. He almost wished he was wearing the panties. Okay, I've got 3 pair based on your sizes. Helen recommended these socks. Mark's mother said, interrupting Mark's gaze. He blushed a little getting caught like that and hoped his mother hadn't noticed him being so prissy just then. Had to be lace, Mark said, taking the lace socks from his mom. Of course. Now be careful when you sit. Gather your dress under you so it doesn't get wrinkled, Mark's mother said. Gather how? Mark asked. Honey, have you ever watched girls sit? Mark's mother asked. Yes? I guess so? Mark said. Then just do the same thing when you sit, Mark's mother said, holding back any details on how Mark was supposed to do that. She was a little curious over him knowing or not. Like this? Mark said as he ran both hands down his skirt as he sat. Exactly like that, Mark's mother said, confirming something but not sure what it was yet. She too was wishing she had him put panties on first. She decided she'd push a little as she added, try those shoes on and see how they fit, and I'll be right back. Mark bent and picked up the first box, opening to a pair of white patent leather Mary Jane shoes. They were clearly meant for a little girl as Mark slipped the left shoe over his left foot. They were a bit big, which made him put the sock on. Almost just right, Mark noted, with the lace sock on. He did the other foot as the door opened again. Mom, what are those for? Mark asked, already knowing since he was the only one in the room. His mother was holding a pair of light pink ruffled panties. Silly question. Now go on and finish that shoe, then put these on, Mark's mother said. Panties? You want me to wear girls' panties now? Mark said, shocked that his mother would consider such a thing. Going to sooner or later, so doing this now is going to make it a lot better later, Mark's mother said. How is me wearing panties now going to make it better later? Mark asked. Honey, some of this anguish you're feeling is because it's so odd. It's odd because you've never worn this kind of stuff before. I'm just thinking that if you do wear everything, including the panties, then it won't be as bad on Saturday? Worth a shot, right? Mark's mother said, hoping her explanation sounded plausible. Hadn't thought about that, Mark said, blushing at his decision to put those panties on as he added, can you step out for a second? Tell you what, when you are dressed, just come out so we can see you in the light. How's that? Mark's mother asked. Okay, Mark said, taking the panties from his mother. His hand shook slightly. They felt like silk and he blushed again, thankful this time his mother wasn't watching. It took a bit to get under all of his slips and dress, but he got his underpants off before stepping into that pink nylon. He suddenly worried over the risk of ruining that delicate fabric, but he realized it too late to do anything about it now. Okay, Mark said from the other side of the doorway. He stepped out as he said it and flushed anew when he spotted a couple of girls between their mothers watching. The girls and their mothers were smiling. Mark, as best he could, smiled back. Maybe his mother was right, Mark mused as he moved to the mirrors. Mark saw Steve in the mirror's reflection, and that face on Steve reminded Mark of himself when he had seen Ralph wearing his dress. Steve looked like he was agony, and Mark wanted to shout, wave and say, it's not that bad. Only Mark didn't dare such a thing, but suddenly did think that. So, what do you think? Mark's mother asked. Mom, I'm in a dress, Mark answered. Hello. I know that, but what about the style, the look of it? Mark's mother asked. I'm not supposed to care about that, Mark said, fighting the slight grin Carol couldn't help but notice. Okay, try this then. Do you think your sister would like it? Mark's mother asked, looking at Mark in the mirror. My sister? Oh, right. Well, I suppose my sister would love this sort of dress, Mark said, overemphasizing the word sister. She would also love the panties, Mark mused as he stood moving slightly for that reason. Well, I guess we've got your sister's outfit then, Mark's mother said. It was pretty, it felt pretty on, and suddenly, with Mark knowing that those in the store more or less approved of it or at least didn't think him a sissy for wearing those things, made it somehow better. Mark knew it was coming to an end, or at least this part anyway, but wondered what he'd look like with long hair. Mom? Mark asked. What, honey? Mark's mother said, fusing with the caller for a second. She too grew slightly sad that the moment was passing. Are we? I mean, did that woman say we had to wear long hair or anything? Mark asked. You know, I was thinking that very thing. I mean, it would make perfectly good sense now, wouldn't it? Mark's mother said, picking up on Mark's question as she added, so would makeup, as I think about it. I mean, when the time comes. I'm guessing the better the look, the better Don Venuto is going to feel about it. I would think that as well, Mark said, feeling slightly giddy over the prospects of makeup and hair and perhaps even a bow. He was angry still, but with the Don to blame he could let up a little. If you want my opinion, I'd say yes on the wig and definitely yes on at least a little makeup, Mark's mother noted. Think so? Mark asked, hoping to make it sound like his mother's idea. Definitely, Mark's mother noted. So now what? Mark asked as that last question was asked. Well, we should think about getting you a wig, so I suppose that should be our next stop then. Perhaps that woman Helen can help, Mark's mother said. Carol took that as a cue to go talk with Helen, leaving Mark there by the mirrors alone. He twisted quickly and made a few quick steps to catch up, gasping a little more to himself as the dress moved and rustled about him. His shoes clacking like a tap dancer's on the tile walkways between the islands of carpet as he caught up. Don't do that, Mark said, clutching his mother's hand. Oh, I'm sorry, honey. Thought you could stand there for a moment or two, Mark's mother said as they walked up to Helen. Lovely. Absolutely adorable, Helen said, ignoring what Mark might say about that. Mark blushed and didn't say anything over the compliments. Helen, we're thinking about a wig, Carol said. Now that's a thought. Trouble is they are somewhat expensive unless you can find a store that sells the Halloween type of wigs. Oh, wait. You know what, I mean, if you want, I could loan you one of ours. We've got a few that we use on our mannequins. If the party is Saturday, you could bring it back on Monday. How's that? Helen said. That would be wonderful. Thank you so much, Carol said. They're in the back. Wait a moment and let me get one and see if it's going to work or not, Helen said as she moved past the counter towards the door at the back. She returned a few minutes later, giving Mark a chance to look for Ralph and Steve. Ralph was trying on shoes and Mark found Steve over in the bridal section. Ralph still looked sad, but not as sad as Steve was. Mark, for whatever reason, although he was sure about some of it, didn't feel nearly as bad as before. Those girls with their mother were no longer concentrating on him but on Ralph, since they and he were near the shoes. That's a pretty dress, a girl's voice said, breaking Mark's concentration on what he was wearing and his friends. What? Oh. Thanks, I guess, It's not for me. I mean, it's for a party. Mark said, laughing nervously and feeling flustered while twisting to see the source of the voice. He didn't know the girl, and suddenly being her focus made him blush more. So what's the occasion that makes a guy buy a dress? I mean, why are you guys dressing up like this? The girl asked. Costume party on Saturday. All the guys are supposed to go as girls. Steve answered, not too easily but not nearly as hard as it might have been earlier. How cool! The girl said and added, be better if you had longer hair. We're going to try that. Steve said and added, lady is going to get a wig that she uses for her mannequins. Right now? The girl asked. Yes. Mark said. Way cool. Going to be interesting to see your transformation. The girl said and then added, I'm Tracy. Tracy McCall. Mark. Mark Evans. Mark said, extending his hand when Tracy extended hers. You from around here? Mark asked, forgetting suddenly that he was in a dress. Sort of. I mean, we just moved here. Looking for something to wear for a wedding. Tracy said and asked, so what's the school like? What can I say, boring. Mark said casually, but catching himself trying to act suddenly macho, and that made him laugh. What's so funny? Tracy asked. This. I mean me and you. I mean us talking like this with me wearing these things. Just struck me as funny as all. Mark said, feeling almost relaxed suddenly. I like it. Tracy said. The dress? Mark asked. No, you in the dress. Tracy said and added, kind of cool in a way. Not sure exactly why, but I think it's kind of cool. Kind of sissy. Mark said, suddenly blushing again. Definitely, but in this case not a bad thing. Tracy said. Not a bad thing? Mark asked and added, why? Don't ask me, just is. Sort of like you crossing over to the other side for a bit. Kind of nice knowing a guy that can do that. Hate it when guys get all macho and stuff. I don't really know why except it's just cool is all. Tracy said. Hello. Carol said, moving back over from the rack of hair bows she was looking at. Hi Mom, this is Tracy. Tracy, this is my mom, Carol. Tracy just moved here. She's going to my school. Mark said nervously and added, she thinks I'm weird. I do not. I think you're cute in that. Tracy said, extending her hand to Mark's mother's as she added, hi. He's fibbing. He is cute in that and I told him so. Nice to meet you, Tracy. Yes, he is. We're hoping that a wig will make him even cuter. Carol said. Can't miss. Oh, that's my mom waving. Got to go. So, will I see you in school? Tracy asked. Sure. Mark said, smiling at the prospects. Now, isn't that just what I told you? Mark's mother said, slightly amazed at the interaction she just witnessed. How casual Mark was suddenly, and, remarkable, how accepting that girl was of her son. She liked Tracy, she decided. I guess you're right, Mom. Weird. She told me the dress was pretty, then just started talking like it was an everyday kind of thing. She said the wig would make me look less sissy, if you can imagine that. Mark said. It will, I'm sure of it. It would be more of a costume then. Mark's mother said. I guess you're right about that. Mark said, watching Tracy walk off. Here we go, Helen said, walking back with a blonde wig that made Mark's chest flutter a little. It was curled in large, soft, flowing curls from top to bottom, and long, as she added, "This one is really just too cute." It really is, Mark's mother said, feeling slightly faint over the wig she was looking at. It was such a little girl style between the color and those curls. Here, they go on easily enough, Helen said as she stepped in front of Mark while gathering the wig so she could slip it over his head. Be right back, Carol said from behind Mark at the moment. Mark couldn't turn his head to see where his mother was going as the wig came on. How does that feel? Helen said as she began twisting it slightly before tucking it front and back. A little snug, I suppose, Mark said, trying to gauge if that was a good thing or bad thing. It didn't feel all that tight on. Should be a little snug, honey, to stay in place, Helen said as she fussed with the curls and Mark's new bangs. Here, can we try this one? Mark's mother asked from behind. Helen had stopped fussing with the wig. That would be the one I'd have picked for sure, Helen said, taking the bow from Carol. A bow? Mark asked just as he saw it. It was huge. It was satin and chiffon and looked a little like it went with his dress. His dress, he mused, thinking of that dress as his. He should have considered that with long hair there might be a bow. It hadn't dawned on him till that second, and too late now to make an issue of it. Definitely need a bow, Helen said. I agree, obviously, Mark's mother noted. If Mark was right, and he couldn't see the bow in place yet, but if he was right, it would be sticking out from either side given how big it was. He felt the weight of it tug at his wig, but it was his mother's face that said it all in those few seconds. Oh my God, his mother said as she brought her hands to her mouth before adding, I can't believe it. What? Mark asked, knowing at least that the wig had more than likely changed his appearance slightly. Amazing, isn't it? Helen said, moving to Carol's side. What? Mark asked impatiently. Mirror, his mother said, pointing to the mirrors where they had first gotten his dress. Mark walked with his mother those few steps till he stood in front of the mirror. Can't be me? Mark said, looking at the little girl looking back. It isn't, honey. It's your twin sister, Mark's mother noted again with her hands at her mouth as she added, and no camera. Damn. We've got one. A digital that takes discs instead of a memory card. We use it when we are doing our ads, Helen said. Could you, oh please, could you? Mark's mother pleaded. Wait right here, Helen said as she turned and walked off in a hurry. Too weird, Mark said, but not taking his eyes off the image he was seeing. You are absolutely adorable, honey. I mean it, his mother said, fussing with a curl. Not supposed to be, Mark said. Oh, now stop and tell me that you can't at least admire that image for just a second without your ego getting in the way of this. Honey, you are so cute, Mark's mother noted. I guess so, Mark said, blushing. You are, Mark's mother said, bending down and taking his cheeks in her hand. So at least we know what I'd look like as a girl now, Mark said, trying to find a way to say what he was thinking. He couldn't believe how he looked. He couldn't help it, but he felt so oddly wonderful looking at himself and not seeing any of the boy at the moment. Here we go. Mark, why don't you stand by yourself for a couple then with your mom? Helen said, coming over with a large digital camera. Mark turned at Helen's voice and smiled. Carol moved off to the side as Helen brought the camera up. The flash went off and another a second later. Now one with Mom, Helen said. Carol moved closer, putting her arm around Mark as Helen brought the camera up. Another flash and then another again after that. Mark, take hold of your skirt between your forefingers and thumbs, Helen said. What? Mark asked, not sure what Helen meant. Forefinger and thumb. Like this? Helen said, making an O with her fingers. Like a girl? Mark asked, sounding shocked a little. He didn't exactly want to do that. Please? His mother asked. Mark took up the skirt a little in that dainty sort of way and again smiled when Helen said so. Another flash and a second flash a moment later. Okay? Mark said, getting uncomfortable with standing there as a girl might. He wasn't sure where Steve and Ralph were, but a boy posing like that worried him a little. Good enough. Thank you, Mark's mother said. Then I guess we're done, Helen said as she clicked the small disc out to hand it to Carol as she added, they are JPG files. If you've got any sort of package that reads those, you can see them easily enough. Good resolution, and if you don't have a graphics package, just use your internet browser. Helen, you are such a treasure. Thank you so much, Carol noted as she took the disc from her. Come on and I'll write up the tag and let Mark your change, Helen said. Mark wasn't sure why, but the thought of changing made him suddenly sad. So did his mother, for that matter. Mark's eyes met his mother's and her eyes made him blush a little. About that? Mark's mother said as they made their way towards the sales desk at the back. About what? Mark asked. Changing? Mark's mother said, pausing. Changing what? Mark asked, not sure what the context was for that word. Okay, so I'm crazy for asking this and Noah's going to be just fine with me, but... I mean... Damn, this is awkward. Okay, I'm going to try this again. So what do you think about not changing till we get home? Mark's mother asked. What? Mark said, trying to sound shocked but not sure it came out that way. He was almost sure it made him sound too excited, and a large part of him was. You know, just for the trip home. No stopping, no side trips, just straight home. We can pull straight into the garage. His mother noted, almost speaking too fast, obviously nervous. Why? Mark asked. So I can enjoy this a little bit longer. Sounds nuts, I know, but besides today and then Saturday, it's the last time I'll see you like this. Just too short a time is all. His mother said in frustration and then added, stupid idea, isn't it? Yes. I mean... I'm not sure. I mean, it's not stupid, I guess, but if I say yes, what does that say of me? Mark noted as he imagined the trip outside and then the drive home. He thought of them driving down 3rd, then onto Baker Road before the freeway and finally his neighborhood. The risk along the way, the risk near home and then at home. It says that you understand what I just asked of you and why I hope it's a yes, but like I said, your no is going to be okay. Mark's mother noted with a soft smile. There was hope in her eyes, but also in Mark's as she watched for a sign either way. We'd pull into the garage, right? Mark asked. You'd never have to get out of the car till then. Mark's mother promised. Then what? Mark asked. Then dinner, some television and bed? Mark's mother noted with a smile now slightly wider as a hint of a yes caught her off guard. But still dressed? Mark asked. Right up to bedtime if I can manage it. Mark's mother noted. I guess so, Mark said, trying to keep any hint of excitement out of his voice. It was the wig, he thought. The image of the bow came back as the weight of it still tugged at his hair. His hair, he thought, as the soft curls tickled his ear, his neck, and occasionally his cheek. His bangs, the panties, the dress and slip. He thought of it all. Thank you, his mother said, giving him a light hug as they reached the counter. It's all covered, and the only thing you'll have to do is return the wig on say Monday or Tuesday. Okay? Helen said as she started writing down the tags on the card she now sat in front of her. That's really very kind of you, Helen, Carol said. Then that's it. I'll get a dress bag for the slip and dress, Helen said. He's going to wear these things home, Carol said happily. Well, now that's wonderful. How about I get the bags and then we put your clothes in another then? Helen said, looking at Mark then at his mother. That would be perfect, Carol noted. And a purse? Helen asked. Purse. Now that might be a good idea. Is that covered? Carol asked. It can be, sure, why not? Yes, that's covered. Mark, honey, why don't you go find something suitable for that dress while I finish this order with your mom? Helen said. Mark wasn't expecting to leave his mother's side, but nodded as he looked in the direction for those purses. It was towards the front of the store, and his panic rose a little that he'd have to cover that distance alone. He turned and walked off, hoping no one would notice. A few did, including those two girls and their moms who were near the jewelry, and that girl Tracy, now standing in front of those mirrors in a lavender floor-length dress. She waved. Mark waved back briefly and blushed. Mark looked for Ralph but didn't see him, although he did see Steve. There was no recognition in Steve's face when their eyes connected. In fact, Steve broke contact almost instantly, and it made Mark wonder if Steve thought he was just another girl suddenly. Why that thought pleased Mark made him giddy a little, but it did. Steve's eyes were puffy and red from crying, and it looked recent as his mother stood behind him. Steve was wearing a white lace little girl's dress over tights without shoes. He was standing near Tracy when she had waved. It really wasn't that bad, Mark thought to himself as he neared the purses. Not worth crying over, Mark decided as he smiled. Definitely not worth crying over as he picked up a little black patent leather purse. The clasp had Cinderella and enamel on it. This one, Mark mused out loud before suddenly realizing he'd just done that. Got one, I see, Mark's mother said, looking at his choice. He'd picked black patent to match his shoes. Why that delighted her was something she'd have to think on, but what a difference in him since that trip here. The thought of him as a girl was odd, but less so when she imagined it in this way, this pretend sort of way. He could be his twin sister, she mused as Helen took the tag from the purse to add to the list. Okay, dress, slip, shoes, socks, hair bow, 3 pair of panties and the purse, Helen said as she finished totally the invoice part of the card. Mark heard that 3 pair of panties when she said it, but kept his reaction to himself. 3 pair of panties, which meant there were 2 more in that bag that now held his clothes and shoes. His mother had bought extra panties? How odd this day was, Mark thought. It was bright outside, too bright, Mark thought as they made their way to their car. What was he doing, Mark also thought, as a small amount of traffic paused in front of the store to allow them to cross to the parking lot. He saw Ralph then standing off in the distance to their right, but still in the parking lot with his mother. To Mark's shock, Ralph was still dressed but without a wig. A boy in a dress, and right there in the middle of the day. Mark squeezed his mother's hand more for the thought of the wig than for anything else. What? Mark's mother asked and then realized that Mark was looking at Ralph. I wouldn't have done that to you. I know, Mark said. It was the longest and shortest trip to and from town Mark had ever taken. Each light they stopped at a new kind of adventure, with each light getting easier. The freeway hardly an adventure at all, except that he could see his reflection in the window when they darkened from the trees. That bow peeking from either side made him smile. His hands folded in the folds of his dress, and near the hem of it did as well. The tips of his Mary Jane shoes showing a little till he moved his feet forward more, and then his purse in his lap. His, he mused. All of it now his. Penny for your thoughts? His mother asked. Going to cost you a lot more than that, Mark said, laughing. So, I'll owe you, Mark's mother said. I think I'm nuts, Mark said. Nuts? Why? Mark's mother asked. Agreeing to stay dressed. This drive. The way I feel, Mark said. It was that last part that caught Carol's attention. How do you feel? Mark's mother asked. I'm not supposed to like this sort of stuff, Mark said flatly. And you catch yourself liking it a little, Mark's mother said as a statement and not a question. Yes, Mark said in frustration, or at least hoping he sounded frustrated. My guess, and this is a professional opinion, is that you like it for the same reason we like it, Mark's mother noted. We? Mark asked. We as in girls. Of course we like it. What's not to like? Silky panties are still silky panties on a girl. That slip moving about under a pretty dress? Heck yes, we like it. You'd be nuts not to, his mother noted with a laugh. Boys are not supposed to like this stuff, Mark said. I know the rules. Good heavens, your grandmother had a fit when I brought you over for a visit in a frilly little dress that one time, Mark's mother said. M.O.M., Mark said. Honey, you had just learned to walk. Way too long ago for you to remember, and I'd gotten the dress from a friend. You'd spit up on yourself and ruined the outfit I'd put you in, and she was going to loan me one of her daughter's rompers until I asked to borrow that little dress. Couldn't help myself, Mark's mother said. But we're not supposed to. Mark was going to state again that boys don't like this stuff, but didn't finish. Actually, honey, the rules, as I know them, simply states that you're not supposed to show that you like that stuff, Mark's mother said. What? What's that supposed to mean? Mark asked. Sweetheart, those rules no one writes down, I might add, just mean you can't actually show that you like the way this stuff feels. Although, if you can be honest with me, you'll agree that it's impossible not to like it. Sweetheart, you've got the same senses as a girl does, so silk, satin, or a little touch of sugar and spice and everything nice has simply got to feel the same exact way for you as it does for us, Mark's mother said flatly. Then why the rules? Mark asked in frustration. Now that's the real question, and I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I'm guessing it's because a lot of boys would dress like this without those rules, and the ones that can't handle it, the ones who like following rules, just don't want that happening, Mark's mother said. You're guessing at that? Mark said. Of course I am, but it's as good a guess as any. Okay, so why do you think those rules are there? Mark's mother asked. I don't know, Mark said. So then, my opinion of this is valid then? Mark's mother asked. As good as any, I guess, Mark said. Then can I ask you something, just for the sake of argument and only between you and me? Mark's mother asked. I guess, Mark said with a touch of apprehension. He was already violating those unwritten rules big time. So does it feel good or not? I mean, if you ignore those rules. Mark's mother asked. Maybe? Mark said, straddling the fence for his ego's sake. Does it feel good or not? His mother asked. Okay. Yes. Yes, it does. Mark said, throwing caution to the wind. A wind also, as it happens, that was making his hair move slightly on his right side. It felt really good, he decided. Then that's really all we have to care about for now. Mark's mother noted happily. It made Mark even more comfortable suddenly. Comfortable enough to ask another question. Mom? Mark asked. What? His mother answered. Mom, why 3 pair of panties? Mark asked. You caught that, did you? Mark's mother noted. Yes? Mark said. Well, tell me this, how is that pair holding up? Mark's mother asked and added, don't want to embarrass you, but since we are talking we might just as well explore this some more. So what was the question? Mark asked back. How are those panties holding up? His mother asked again, smiling. Not very well, I suppose. Mark answered, blushing but figuring his mother already knew the answer, and of course he also now knew why she'd gotten 2 more pair now. I rest my case. Mark's mother said, laughing. So, do you think the other boys, the guys that have to do this for Saturday, like it as well? Mark asked, anxious to change the subject. Absolutely. They are the same as you. To be honest with you, you and those other boys are the same as Don Venuto's son. The only difference is that he's effeminate, and that unfortunately gives you guys reason enough to tease him. Mark's mother noted. I didn't. Never did. Mark said in his defense. But you never stood up for him, and you could have. So could Ralph and even Steve? His mother said. I wish I had now. Mark said as he got out of the car just as the garage door came down. Well, it's never too late to change. And pardon my pun. Mark's mother said and added, so what say we fix dinner? Aren't you worried I'll get this dress stained or something? Mark asked as the sides of his skirt rubbed the right and left edges of the kitchen door frame. Yes, so grab that pinafore from the bag. Mark's mother said. Where? A what? Mark asked, not having a clue what his mother was saying. It's in the bag. A pinafore. Goes with the dress. Girls wear them. No, make that girls used to wear them to do their chores so they wouldn't get their dresses dirty. Mark's mother said. Which bag? Mark asked. It's in the dress bag. Mark's mother answered. Mark moved over to the guest closet, now holding the bag, and zipped the bag open, finding the white cotton pinafore as his mother noted. It's like a dress? Mark said, pulling the soft satiny pink hanger out that held it. Supposed to look pretty as well as being functional. It's designed that way to cover the dress. Here. Mark's mother said, undoing the large sash allowing the pinafore to open. She slipped it over Mark and his dress before moving to the back of it to tie the sash into a bow. Another layer. Mark said, but not with the sarcasm he might have used. Girls and their layers. Mark's mother said, smiling as she moved to the refrigerator. Tell me about it. Mark said, smiling back as he added, so what's for dinner? Hey, You're the girl tonight. You tell me? Mark's mother said as she paused at the refrigerator door, hesitating a bit more before she started to walk out of the kitchen door as she added, "That is when you get it cooked. As for me, I'm going to get me a book and read a bit." Mark watched her go into the living room. He was tingling a little and short of breath. From hell to heaven he mused over the span of that couple of hours and wondering how it was he'd passed whatever threshold he'd passed. He didn't spin exactly, but he did turn quickly as he moved. He wasn't the only one tingling over the sensations of this day. Carol got that book, but she didn't actually read any of it, sitting there instead, simply retracing their steps and what had happened. She was also wondering how she could get Mark's twin sister to stay around for a while or at least visit on occasion. It was nice having a girl around the house. They ate a pork chop each, green beans and dinner rolls, with Mark setting the table, serving and doing the dishes after. When they did turn in, there was no question that Mark would not have objected to wearing that dress again, and that was the opinion of both had they shared their thoughts on the subject. Mark wanted to say so and his mother wanted to ask, but neither did. Mark woke feeling odd but smiled at the dress bag now holding his dress and slip on the back of his door. His Mary Jane shoes were resting on the closet floor with his lace socks sitting over them. He almost wished he could dress for school but buried that thought behind a snicker. Ralph and he met halfway to the school. Neither talked much and neither talked about their outfits. Steve did show up on the walk, but he didn't join them as they reached the school. "Mark!" Tracy called from the schoolyard as Mark and Ralph walked through the gate. "Hey, Tracy," Mark said, happy to see the girl he'd met in the dress store. "This is Tracy," Mark said to Ralph as he added, "She's new." "This is Ralph." "Hey, Ralph. So what sort of dress you wearing Saturday?" Tracy asked. "Don't want to talk about it," Ralph said, turning off to head for class. "A little touchy," Tracy said, and then asked, "You okay, or should I keep my mouth shut?" "Nope. I'm okay," Mark said. "Thought so," Tracy said. "What do you mean?" Mark asked, feeling slightly defensive suddenly. "You're a cool guy," Tracy said. "Cool?" Mark asked. "No hang-ups. You know, typical guy hang-ups." "That's cool," Tracy said. "Oh, I've got hang-ups. Plenty of them," Mark said, laughing. "Maybe so, but not as bad as your buddy Ralph." "You are my kind of guy," Tracy said, smiling. "Thanks," Mark said, at a loss for words. Tracy didn't seem to mind what he was doing in the store, although Mark wasn't sure how to talk about such things since he'd never talked of such things. "Panties?" Tracy said as they started heading for class. "What?" Mark said, getting caught off guard. "Did you get panties?" Tracy asked. "I'm not saying," Mark said, matching that silly grin on her face but blushing besides. "Okay, try this. Wink once for no, twice for yes," Tracy said. "No," Mark said. "Okay, no need to get all paranoid. Just hope it was those fancy ones," Tracy said. "Who said I got any at all?" Mark asked. "Your face," Tracy said, laughing. "Can we talk about something else?" Mark asked. "Sure. How about a soda after school?" Tracy said. "I can't," Mark said and stopped. He didn't want to say why, but his mother was going to do his nails for the party tomorrow. "Bummer," Tracy said. Mark, feeling frustrated that his no would somehow put this budding relationship with a girl he was suddenly fascinated over at risk, sighed and said, "Okay. I mean, if you must know. Nails. Mom's doing my nails tonight. Now see that? I'm telling you, Mark, we were made for each other. As it happens, I am an expert at doing nails. Coincidentally, I specialize in doing guys' nails." Tracy said. "No, you don't. You are a nut," Mark said, laughing. "Maybe so, but if you say yes and come over to my place, it gets us that soda and you can still get your nails done?" Tracy said. "I guess. I mean, I could ask my mom and see if it's okay," Mark said. "Great. Oh, there's the first bell," Tracy said as both started walking faster. They had 3 minutes before the second bell as Tracy added, "See you at lunch?" "Sure," Mark said as Tracy darted into her class. Most of the conversation between Mark and Tracy covered small talk and a bit of their lives as they ate their lunch. Tracy's dress, when Tracy talked about Mark in that store again, was for a wedding Saturday, although she teased Mark over the fact his dress was prettier than hers. Mark, by the second half of his day, was smitten. Tracy, by the second half of her day, was positive Mark was a sissy. For Tracy, that was a good thing. "Sissy boys," Tracy once told another bisexual girl, "is like having the best of both worlds." The fact that she and Mark were nearly the same size made it even better. "Saw that girl in school today." "Tracy?" "The one we met at the store. She's invited me for a soda at her place. Says she could do my nails if that's okay?" Mark asked after kissing his mother hello. "She was cute." "Sure." Mark's mother said, only slightly frustrated that she couldn't do Mark's nails. "Thanks, Mom, see you at dinner," Mark said. He was feeling so odd as he walked briskly down the street. Not a date actually, but close, and Tracy was really cute. Although it was that odd part that had Mark on the verge of skipping. He was going to a girl's house to have his nails done. Now how many guys, in 100 blocks of him, could say that, he mused. Even more odd how they met, given he was in a girl's boutique wearing a dress when she introduced herself. He would have thought something like that would scare a girl away, but it obviously hadn't. Mark found himself having to control his walk just so he wouldn't skip. "Hey," Tracy said and added, "I see you found my place. We play ball in the park. I'm just on the other side," Mark said, stepping into the house. "Sis, this is Mark, the boy I told you about," Tracy said to an older girl sitting in front of the television as Tracy added, "That's my sister Tammy." Mark nodded, frustrated on several levels, not the least of which what it was Tracy might have said of him. He was also a little embarrassed by the fact there was a stranger that was going to be around while he got his nails done. There was also the realization, halfway to Tracy's place, that he'd have to make his way home with his fingernails painted. "Hey, Mark. Nice to meet you," Tammy said and added, "I thought you said he dresses like a girl?" "Not me," Mark said. "Ignore her. She's teasing," Tracy said, looking at her sister with a smile that eased some of the anxiety that had come with that remark. "I'm sorry, Mark. Couldn't resist. Tracy told me about meeting you in that dress shop and your party tomorrow," Tammy said, still laughing a little, and then added, "Although, if you are interested, our aunt hasn't found a flower girl yet." "Tammy, will you stop?" Tracy said. "Okay, I'm done. Just ignore me from here on," Tammy said, turning her attention back to the television as she added, "Anyway, it's nice to meet you, Mark." "Nice to meet you," Mark said, trying to shake off the notion of why he was there and that little dig of Tracy's sister. So, your dress is pink? Tracy said, walking Mark to the kitchen. Yes. Mark said, feeling odd again. His dress was pink, she said, and said it so casually. We can do pink to match your dress, but it might not since we don't have the dress here. Or, we can do a white. I'm thinking an off-white with a little glitter. How's that? Tracy said as she sat in front of a cosmetic bag and tray full of nail polish and tools. Mark, seeing the bottles and knowing he was about to get his nails done, wanted suddenly to call it off, although he was just as thrilled at the prospects of this. He was also worried about making it home. Just discussing the color made him giddy. You're the expert, Mark said. White then. White with the glitter. Soda is in the fridge, Tracy said as she started moving the bottles on the tray. Mark moved to the refrigerator, opened it, and found a Coke. He popped the top as he turned back towards the table. Won't be able to do that anymore, Tracy said, smiling. Do what? Mark asked, not sure what Tracy was referencing. Open a soda that way. Have to teach you how to do what girls do when they've just spent $20 on their nails, Tracy said. Oh. Mark noted. That made sense given he just used his nail to pop his soda open. In his defense though, he added, not going to be doing this again, I hope. Now, don't say that, Tracy noted. Don't say what? Mark asked. That you're not going to be doing this ever again, Tracy said. Why? I mean, I'm just doing this for the party tomorrow, Mark said. Why? Because you never know when you might meet a girl that might like doing your nails. That's why, Tracy noted with a snicker. Not likely, Mark said, but feeling suddenly dumb since it was clear Tracy meant herself. It could happen? Tracy said, smiling mischievously. You like guys that like getting their nails done? Mark asked, knowing full well that the answer should be absolutely not. Absolutely, Tracy said. Okay, so that's a little weird, Mark said, sitting down at the chair close to Tracy's. There was an open newspaper she'd put there before she began shaking the polish. Not really. Hey, like I said, I like guys that don't have all of those macho hang-ups, Tracy said. But not guys that actually like getting their nails done, Mark asked. The answer, again, is yes, Tracy said and added, give my a hand. Mark extended his hand and felt faint at what was happening as he asked, seriously? Seriously. I mean, what's wrong with a guy that can be a little feminine around a girl? Tracy said. It's just that guys are not supposed to be feminine. I mean, not on purpose, Mark said. That's a myth. I think that actually started when guys that liked being feminine on occasion wanted to hide it from everyone else, Tracy said. I'm guessing there are guys that don't want to be feminine, even a little, Mark said, not sure how to carry his end of the conversation. The word sissy had come to mind, but that word felt uncomfortable. More than uncomfortable given what was about to happen. Never met any yet, Tracy said. What do you mean? Mark asked. I've known plenty of guys, some as rough and tumble as you, but they didn't mind showing their feminine side, Tracy said and added, makes all the difference as far as I'm concerned. I could be wrong, but I honestly don't think, given the right circumstances, that there is a guy that wouldn't be willing to step over to the other side on occasion. That part about being rough and tumble made Mark feel better, especially since it was added in his context. That other part about the right circumstances also hit a chord. Although in that same instant Mark did wonder if he'd be willing to do this simply for the sake of just doing it. His answer to that question, asked in silence, was now a yes. "What are those?" Mark asked as Tracy pried open a small package of nail extensions. "Glue-on nails. I'm going to add these first, then paint them," Tracy said as she began sorting out the nails by size. "Oh," Mark said, trying to sound calm. It wasn't what he'd expected, and clearly they would extend his nails a lot, as he added, "So how do you do things with nails that long?" "Easy. You just get used to the length. I'll show you some of the basic do's and don'ts when I finish. So tell me about this party and how it came about," Tracy said as she started lining the nails in a row by those sizes. Mark watched in fascination, forgetting the risk of walking home with those on and painted, and began to explain how the party came about. He wasn't sure who Don Venuto really was other than the rumors that started a few days ago. He mentioned Mario, the Don's son, and what was happening then made it clear he hadn't been part of those teasing. Mark's first nail went on with a small drop of watery glue. It was his thumb first, then the rest of his fingers one by one. Tracy did his second hand, and after a bit of drying time Tracy added what she called the base coat. A clear, dull coating that took time to dry and left Mark now wondering how he was going to finish his soda. First lesson. Drinking soda. Here, watch what I do, Tracy said, picking up her kin and adding, "You reach for things with the pad of your fingers and not with the nails. That's the big difference between girls and boys. Boys reach, girls extend. Always extend your hand for things in a way that isn't going to risk scratching or damaging your nails." Mark picked up his kin the way Tracy picked hers up. The first coat of white went on after that, and more drying time as they talked about school, what they'd do when they graduated, and other bits and pieces unrelated to what was happening. What was really happening, as far as Tracy was concerned, was Mark's first steps to becoming her sissy boy. It wasn't too far off what Mark was thinking about as he considered what it might have been like dressed and doing this. Of course, Mark wasn't considering this as sissy lessons, although the word popped into his head a couple more times as he sat there blowing on the set Tracy just finished. Mark's hands were transformed in front of his eyes and definitely girlish, given that his fingertips were now glistening in the kitchen light. Tracy added another coat of white, then a clear with touches of glitter before a top coat of clear. Between the base, color, glitter, and a second coat of top, he now wore 6 layers of nail polish. "Pretty," Tammy said, coming into the kitchen and taking a soda from the refrigerator as she added, "So what color is your dress, Mark?" Mark's mouth went dry, or felt like it had, as he said, "Pink." "Of course," Tammy said. That of course made Mark defensive again. He was sitting there getting his nails done and for a dress that was pink, and worried that Tammy was getting the wrong impression of him as he asked, "Why?" "The reason for the color. Not many colors go with pink." "Good choice," Tammy said. "Tracy picked it," Mark said, making sure that Tammy understood that he hadn't made the choice. French would have worked as well, but they can be a real pain unless you get them done at a salon. "French?" Mark asked. "White tips with clear over the rest of your nails. Nicely formal. Getting that style for the wedding," Tammy said as she headed for the door and the living room once more. "Girl talk," Tracy said. "What?" Mark asked. "You just got to talk girl talk and you didn't faint." "Another good sign," Tracy said. "Girl talk," Mark mused. He just talked girl talk, and he laughed. "You see, that's what I've been saying." Get a guy comfortable so he's not going to be at risk of being thought of as a sissy, and voila, he can do just about anything a girl can do. Tracy said. Right. Mark said sarcastically. Right on. Tracy said and added, so, your mom give you any of the moves? Moves? Mark said. Girl moves? Tracy said. Girl moves? Mark asked. When girls wear dresses, they have moves they have to keep in mind. We learn it along the way. You're going to have to learn a few of the basics as well. Tracy said. Like what? Mark asked, trying to imagine what Tracy was saying, then realizing she might mean keeping his legs together as he asked, Legs? Legs most of all. Here, I'll show you. It's going to take about half an hour for those layers to harden so we can spend the time learning some of our girl moves. Tracy said, standing. She grabbed another kitchen chair and sat it in the middle. Go to the stove, then walk to the chair and sit. Tracy added. Sit like how? Mark asked. Just sit, but think about the way you sit as you do so. Tracy said. Just sit? Mark asked, standing and moving to the stove. Just sit. Tracy said. Mark moved to the stove, then sat. Like that? Like that? Tracy said and then added, now watch me. Tracy moved to where Mark had been, walked to the chair and sat as she said, see the difference? No? Mark said, trying to compare what he'd done to how she'd sat. Okay, you came in at an angle and slid into the chair. Your legs were naturally set apart and you flopped down. I, on the other hand, came in so I was directly in front of the chair, facing forward, keeping my legs together, and eased down onto the seat. Tracy said and added, try it my way now. Mark did and watched his hands after Tracy warned him that they were still at risk of getting scratched. He forgot to keep his legs together. He tried again at Tracy's urging, then caught himself holding his hands out to keep from striking them against himself. The act of holding his hands out and sitting with his legs together didn't escape his attention. That one was nearly perfect. Tracy said as Mark tried again as she said, that's a girl move. Great. Mark said sarcastically but giddy over the feminine way it made him feel. Tracy might be right, Mark mused about this opportunity thing. Being able to do things that would be otherwise forbidden was exciting in many ways. Here, now pick this up. Tracy said as she placed a bottle of nail enamel on the floor as she added, same as before, just pick it up the way you'd pick it up as a guy. Mark bent at the waist, picked the bottle up and held it. Now watch me. Imagine again I'm in a dress. Tracy said as she walked up to the bottle she'd put back on the floor. She bent at the knees slightly, keeping her back almost straight as she picked up the bottle. Mark did it again, this time the way Tracy showed him. Took 3 more tries, but on the 3rd try he'd done it nearly as well as Tracy did. Now sitting in a dress? Tracy said and added, nails should be okay for this, but don't touch the tops too much. You come to the chair and in a coordinated maneuver bring your hands back to your skirts around the area of your bottom. As you begin to sit, you slid your hands down and out along your skirt, so when you reach the chair, your skirts have been stretched enough so there are no gathers. Keeps your dress from getting wrinkled. Tracy said as she did it a couple of times. Mark tried doing it a couple of times, feeling very self-conscious as he did so. It was actually not hard but awkward coordinating the action of a dress with sitting, and harder still since he tried imagining wearing one. This would be better in a dress. Tracy said. Not going to happen. Mark said, thinking Tracy actually meant he wear a dress. Not dressed. Not slips and panties and stuff, just something with a skirt on it. You won't even have to take what you are wearing off. Tracy said. No. Mark said, smiling. I'm going to have to fail you then on chair sitting. Tracy chided. Bad enough doing what I've already done. I mean, if the guys found out about any of this, I'd be in the same boat as that guy Mario. Mark said. Tragic. Tracy said. It would be. Mark answered. And since there are no guys here, then what's the problem? Tracy said. Those hang-ups we were discussing earlier. Mark said. Then you really must learn to get over it. It's my idea, I'm the one pushing you, so blame me then. Tracy said. Okay, I will. Mark said. Good. Wait here. Tracy said. You're serious? Mark said. Of course. Tracy said, leaving the kitchen. She gave her sister a thumbs up as she walked to the hallway. She grabbed a lavender-colored polyester dress that buttoned at the back and hurried back to the kitchen. What am I doing? Mark asked. Learning girl moves. Tracy said, holding the dress open for Mark to step into it. He did, and a second later slipped his arms into the sleeves before Tracy set it on his shoulders as she added, I won't even button it closed, how's that? Great. Mark said, hoping her sister was still occupied. Now try that again. Tracy said. Mark walked to the chair and slipped his hands flat against his bottom, sliding them down and out as he sat. He did it again, but this time took the skirt on either side, so he was actually holding it on either side when he sat. He did that 4 more times before Tracy was satisfied. Now sitting. Tracy said as she had Mark stay seated on his last try. She showed him how to angle his legs off one side or the other. How to sit with his legs perfectly straight and directly in front of him. She teased him a little into fussing with the hem of his dress. Girls almost always tug at their skirts after they've sat. Sort of a habit. Tracy said as Mark tugged on the hem of his dress. He was also being cautioned constantly about his nails. Almost there. Tracy said. Now what? Mark said, but was completely enjoying himself. Scratching and adjusting. Tracy said. Scratching? Mark asked. You going to be wearing makeup tomorrow? Tracy asked. I don't think so. Mark said. Oh, please do. And get pictures if you can. Anyway, even if you don't, you should know how to take care of an itch when you're wearing makeup. Tracy said as she added, guys scratch, girls dab. Mark watched Tracy dab at the edge of eye and again on a cheek. He'd seen them do that countless times and had never connected it with their nails or makeup. He just thought those sorts of things were girls simply being girlish. He did what Tracy did, and after a time she clapped, extended her hand and said, Congratulations, you've successfully passed Tracy McCall's Transformation 101. Transformation? Mark asked, taking Tracy's hand. Transformation as in transforming as in transformed. Tracy said and added, You are officially a Jane girl. Jane girl? Mark asked. It's like a tomboy, only opposite since you're a guy doing girlish things. It's really an honorary title. Not many boys can carry that distinction. Tracy said. Do I get a certificate or anything like that? Mark said, laughing. No, but you do get the seal of approval kiss. Tracy said, bending forward a little to kiss Mark. She did so on his lips and he kissed back. He felt faint. That was nice. Mark said. Ditto. Tracy said, softening her voice as she added, too bad we didn't have more time. Why? Mark asked. Oh, I was just thinking we could get into some of the more advanced girl moves. Tracy said. What are those? Mark asked. Another time perhaps, but it almost always begins and ends with a kiss. Tracy said, bending in to kiss Mark once again. Oh. Mark said when Tracy broke away again. It was time to go, he noted, and clearly disappointed to even mention it. They kissed once more when she helped him out of his dress and again at the door. Mark promised to call after the party, her using the number of her cell phone now in his pocket. She also made him promise to get at least one picture of him dressed for her. She wanted it for her wallet and laughed over that. Mark walked home with his hands in his pocket except when it was safe to bring them out. He admired the way they looked. Suddenly he stopped. He stopped and looked at his hands, remember those lessons Tracy put him through, and in a dress no less. How odd. How odd, because just the day before yesterday, the day the invitation came, he was ready to run away somewhere and hide. What had happened? What had changed? Mario! Thank you! Mark called out loudly. Hi, honey! Mark's mother said as he walked into the kitchen. She had just started dinner as she added, So? How was your afternoon with Tracy? She seems like a nice girl. Oh, and did she do your nails? Mark, blushing again, lifted his hands from his pockets, holding them palm down. They sparkled under the fluorescent lights. Good heavens, those are beautiful. Mark's mother said, taking his hands in hers. Mom, I just walked across the park with my nails like this. Is that weird or what? I mean, it's like some kind of switch was thrown or something. Mark said, not sure how to put what he was feeling into words. Ah, the wonderful world of make-believe. Mark's mother said. Is that it? Is that all that it takes? Mom, I was in a total panic before we went into that dress shop. I mean, right after that invitation I thought I was going to keel over dead from fear, and now? Honestly, I don't know what's changed. Is it me? Am I a sissy or what? Mark said, jumping all over the place with his words. Of course not. And no, you are not a sissy. Yet, maybe you are, but I don't think so. So let's see what it is that has changed. You were scared because of what other people might think of you, so there is that. When no one seemed to care much in that store, you got past that. You were also afraid of what the other guys might think, but the other guys are doing the same thing you're doing, so that doesn't matter now? Right? Mark's mother asked. Right. Mark answered. And you met this really cute girl who thought you were way cool for doing what you were doing. In fact, she just spent the afternoon helping you paint your nails. Mark's mother said. And teaching me girl moves of all things? Mark said with a short laugh. Really? Mark's mother said and asked, like what? Sitting in a dress, picking something off of a floor, that sort of thing. Oh, and how not to break any of these nails. Mark said. Girl moves. What a great idea. I think I'm going to like this girl. Mark's mother said. She paused again, smiled and asked, So, in all of that, what really has changed then? Me, I guess. Mark answered as he suddenly realized what really had transpired. Isn't it amazing how the same things that we believe can terrorize us can, all of a sudden, thrill us? Mark's mother asked. Yes. Yes, it is. Like I said, this is so weird. I mean, it doesn't make any sense that I can suddenly feel like this. Mark said, ignoring convention or what he risked telling his mother how he felt, but he was about to burst. But it's not sudden, honey. Deep down, or perhaps not so deep, you are like most boys who have admired girls for all sorts of reasons. Some of it, I suspect, over what we wear. A few, perhaps you, admire what we get to do. A lot of this may be going on since you were little. Who knows? So what has really happened is suddenly you getting past your hang-ups. Mark's mother said. That's what Tracy said. Mark noted. She's right. The only real changes that have occurred are within you. Mark's mother noted. I know that now. Funny thing is, I actually yelled in the park thanking Mario. I mean, if it wasn't for him, none of this would have happened. Mark said. Now that is amazing. Mark's mother said. I know. So, anyway, need help with dinner? Mark asked. Sure. But watch those nails. Mark's mother said, laughing. I know. Men reach, women extend. Mark said, moving to the cupboard for dishes and making sure he extended his hand carefully. Girlishly he mused. Mark was animated throughout the meal. More so now than when he was setting the table, and all because he'd asked about makeup. He was wondering if the guys, or so he said, would be wearing makeup because Tracy had asked out of curiosity. His mother, sensing he might be interested himself, suggested it. Something light, given the age he was dressing as, but it wouldn't hurt. Might even help with his looks, his mother noted. Minutes later he was at the kitchen table with dinner simmering, and his mother was doing just that. Foundation, blush, a bit of eyeliner, mascara, and last but not least lipstick. He learned 2 of those girl moves then, the one about lipstick and how to eat. That one about lipstick was what his mother had learned when she first got to try it. First layer is the base, the second layer is for the color, and the third layer is for kissing. As for eating, he simply had to stop using his lips to clean a fork and spoon as you normally would while eating, or risk losing the color on his lips. He was shocked over his looks when his mother finished and felt slightly silly playing with the fork his mother handed him to practice with, and shocked again, but pleased also when she gave him that tube of pink so he could touch up his lips a couple of times. She sat at supper with him looking decidedly sissy without his hair and dress, but extremely feminine besides, and the way he ate gave her goosebumps. She wouldn't have forced this on him, but she was thrilled he was doing it. Sit and practice while I get the dishes, Mark's mother said after they'd cleaned the table. Mark sat in front of the mirror with the box of tissue to blot with and that tube of lipstick to play with, and play he did. Slow, sensuous steps beginning as his mother first showed him with his upper lip, then the lower, then blotting. His mother had him clean his face with makeup remover, cold cream, and a moisturizer before starting over again. They did that for a half dozen more sessions before they went to bed. By the time Mark reached his room for bed, he was actually doing his own face. Which shocked him further was as the nightgown laying on his bedspread and a note. That note, written by his mother, read, "Honey, tomorrow's the day, but I don't think it's going to be nearly as bad for you as it will be for the other boys. I know you know why that is, or at least I hope you do. Meanwhile, I bought this nightgown new and never wore it. It should help you with your dreams. Love, Mom." Mark smiled, shaking slightly while picking up the white nylon gown, holding it by the straps. It flowed lightly in 2 layers of nylon, and beneath it, when he'd lifted it up, was the jacket to wear over it. He wore both garments to bed, and, again, his mother was right, because they did help with his dreams. Wonderful dreams. Wonderful but odd dreams, and only odd because he was a girl in the one he had just before he went to sleep. "Sweetheart? Today's the day," Mark's mother said from the other side of the door. She had thought about going in and waking him but also thought he might be self-conscious in his nightgown. She'd confirmed very late that night he was wearing it. They got the invitation Thursday afternoon, shopped that night. Tracy did his nails Friday afternoon and Mark went to bed in a nightgown Friday night. "I'm up," Mark said, laying there. He'd been awake for some time now, simply laying there in that nightgown, having his own thoughts at how quickly this had transpired. Today was the day, and while Mark was a little scared over the reason for the party, it didn't diminish his feelings over what he'd be wearing. Mark stood, stretched with his arms in front of him to admire his nails and nightgown flowing around him. On his door the dress and slip, on his dresser the bow and his lovely blonde hair. Bubble bath. But before that, shave your legs in the tub and rinse after so you don't have the hairs in the tub. Mark's mother said as she added, "I'm going to get dressed, then start breakfast." "Okay, Mom," Mark said, grinning over what his mother just said. One statement sounding so odd and the other perfectly normal. Bubble bath. Bubble bath. Shave your legs. Shave your legs. Yes, Mark whispered as he slipped out of his nightgown. His nightgown, he whispered. His dress and slip, he also said out loud. So alien those terms, yet so wonderfully exciting as he thought of them in his context. Mark slipped his own robe on, feeling too self-conscious walking out in her nightgown, and found his mother's bath beads already on the counter. Next to those, a new pink razor, shaving cream definitely for a girl in its pink can, dusting powder and deodorant with the label that also read, "Strong enough for a man, but made for a woman." All of it exciting, but nothing compared to those panties. They were nothing compared to the pair he'd worn home under his dress. At first he thought there were two pair, but it turned out to be a single pair in 2 layers. Satiny underlayer under a nylon layer attached only at the waist and legs. A free-flowing layer ruffled across the back. Ruffled encircling each leg, and almost too wide layer of that same lace. Mark literally felt faint when he lifted them up. Pink with white, and that layer of nylon slid delightfully over the satin. It took all of his control to pick up the razor and begin his legs. Mark rinsed under the shower after a slow and delightfully soothing set of moments, watching his girlish hand draw that pink razor along his legs. He finished that and filled the tub, adding a couple of capfuls of his mother's bath beads. Mark soaked for a time now, drawing this experience out for as long as he could, but never for a moment were those panties not on his mind. His mother had talked him into driving home dressed. He'd spent Thursday night till bedtime in those clothes, Friday with Tracy getting his nails done, the nightgown, and now this. If this was what sissies did, then yes, he decided, he was definitely a sissy. Sissy? It didn't sound as bad as it might have if he was not doing what he was doing. Sissies get to wear panties, Mark mused as he stood, and added, those kind of panties. Sissies get to wear dresses, pretty dresses, and slips under them, and Mary Jane shoes. Sissies were simply little girls in boys' bodies, he decided. No wonder that kid Mario was a sissy. Who wouldn't be? Hey, you fall asleep or what? His mother said from the other side of his bedroom door. He'd stepped into the panties just moments before that and darted hurriedly across the hall from the bathroom to his room. Mark still had a few hang-ups, he decided, not wanting his mother to see him. He wasn't sure if it was the panties he didn't want her to see or the state they put him into. Just putting the slip on, Mom, Mark said. Need help? Mark's mother asked. In a minute, Mark said as he adjusted the petticoats and fighting for a little more control as the taffeta met the nylon and satin he already wore. Mark had twisted only slightly, and that motion made him catch his breath as the satiny taffeta with all of its noise blended with the sensation of his panties. It is almost too much as he fought the moan he caught in his throat. All set, Mark said, secure in the knowledge that he was safely hidden under his slip skirts. His mother already had assumed Mark's state, deciding to give him a little privacy for these new experiences. Best shared alone for now, but not forever, she noted. Carol was already sure she would be able to share some of this with Mark. She would also, at some point she decided, need to talk with this girl Tracy. I love those bath beads. Makes you smell so feminine, Mark's mother said, coming into the room. She was going to throw caution to the wind and remain unguarded this day. Me too, Mark said, also ignoring those same conventions he'd held onto so tightly just a couple of days ago. Today was not the day for any hang-ups, although he wondered if that was true of all of the boys or just him. He'd play it by ear when he got to the party, but he wasn't sure he could revert to a masculine mindset very easily if need be. Still feel different? Mark's mother said, slipping his dress over his head. The slips felt decidedly different on his freshly shaved legs. Yes, Mark said with a tone that needed nothing else to be said. Me too, Mark's mother said. You too? What? Mark asked. Seeing you this way, this state you're in, makes me wish we'd done something like this sooner, Mark's mother said. Really? Mark asked. Definitively, Mark's mother answered. I guess I'd have to say yes to that as well, Mark said softly and with a tiny bit of blush to his cheeks. That was almost too much to admit to, but then again he wasn't going to hold back today. Lots of time ahead of us, Mark's mother said, fussing with the skirts of his dress over the petticoats of his slips. Suddenly Mark grew apprehensive. His mother caught his look in the mirror. What's wrong, honey? Mark's mother asked. Don Venuto. Mom, he killed a man for calling his son a sissy or something like that? Mark said quietly. I'm not sure that's true, honey. Those were rumors, Mark's mother said, trying to downplay that part of this. Mom, he's the godfather, or so Ralph said. That's what guys like that do, Mark said. Honey, your children, and my guess is this whole elaborate scheme of his is his way of dealing with what you boys have been doing with his son. I can't imagine him harming you other than what's happened to your egos, Mark's mother said. So you don't think he'd do anything like that to us? Mark asked, wanting desperately to believe no. Absolutely not. I think you are doing exactly what he wants done. Honey, think about it for a second. Too many people know about this and, like I said, it's way too elaborate and far too public for anything other than you boys being humiliated, Mark's mother said in a reassuring voice. I'm not feeling very humiliated right now, Mark said, smiling lightly as his mother fused with the buttons and his sash. I know, you'll simply have to fake that part, Mark's mother said, laughing as she added, There, now sit for your shoes and socks. Mark, gathering his dress almost expertly, sat on his bed. His mother admiring his adaptation and again over her own pleasure in these odd turns of events. She had believed, at least through it, that most of the time in the dress shop she'd be fighting him all the way with this. She'd hardly fought him at all. I've got to fake being a boy, Mark said, laughing. Just around the other boys. Unless they feel like you don't, and just be yourself? Mark's mother said. That would be kind of cool, Mark noted. Bet they do that. Or at least some of them? Mark's mother said. Dumb if they don't, Mark answered as his mother buckled his Mary Jane on his right foot. She did the lacy sock and his second shoe, then stood. Why don't you go sit at my vanity and I'll put breakfast on the table? Mark's mother said, and added, we'll do your hair last. I'm not very hungry, Mark said and added, too nervous. I know, but you need something in your stomach or you're apt to get sick, Mark's mother said and suggested, at least a piece of toast and cocoa. Mark moved off to his mother's room, stopped in front of the mirror and twisted for a time before sitting at her vanity. He'd taken up the pinafore and wore it without tying the back as he picked up the moisturizing cream first. Foundation followed, blush, eyeshadow and liner, then his mascara last. It was different this time with his nails glistening. All of it was different this time. All set? Mark's mother said, covering only slightly the pleasure she felt when her her daughter walked into the kitchen. His face, definitely that of a girl, smiled back and nodded. It was nearly perfect, that face. A bit too much blush and perhaps too much pink lipstick, but she could remember her days playing in her mother's makeup. The hair last, and with it the boy disappeared completely. Not a hint of Mark the boy as he sat quietly with his pretty hands resting together in the gathering folds of his dress. Carol added the bow and fussed some more with the hair before handing him his purse and taking hers next. The party was at 10 sharp. It was just 15 past 9 as Carol also picked up her camera. Mark stood happily posing for a couple of shots before his mother took a breath and nodded. It was time. Hey sport, Tracy said, leaning against his mother's car. What are you doing here? Mark asked. Wanted to get some pictures of my girlfriend, Tracy said, laughing. Girlfriend, Mark said, blushing and looking with a twinge of guilt at his mother. Hi Tracy, Carol said. Hi Mrs. Evans. He makes a really cute girl, Tracy said as she snapped a picture of Mark coming down the steps. I think so too, Carol said and added, honey, can you take a couple of us together? Absolutely, but only if I get to take one of us together, Tracy said. Absolutely, Carol noted as she handed Tracy her camera. Don't I have a say in this? Mark asked, smiling. Both Carol and Tracy said no together and laughed over it. Tracy rushed to get the door for Mark and kissed him lightly on the cheek as he passed. Perfect, Tracy whispered as Mark, gathering his dress, slid into the car. He kept his legs together, Tracy noted, and how wonderful that was, she mused. Mark would make a perfect little sissy, she mused again. Even Tracy's sister thought so this time as they compared notes from yesterday's brief encounter. Call me when you get home, Tracy said as she closed the car door and added, and before you change. Mark nodded, flushed crimson at the prospects of being outside, of Tracy and his mother watching that exchange. Ready? Mark's mother asked. This time? Yes, Mark answered. And we're off, Mark's mother said, backing down the driveway to Tracy's wave. Mark waved back as his mother said, I really like her. Me too, Mark answered as he shifted his legs so he could see his Mary Janes. Mark looked at the map and began providing the directions from the instructions as they eased off the freeway. The house was set in the town's estates, which made sense to Mark, and they grew more elaborate as they made their way up the hill to the final turn and a driveway that could easily be named a road. Good morning, a young man wearing a red jacket said as they stopped at the front of what could only be called a mansion. Those two same men that had delivered the invitation stood at the front steps at a kind of casual parade rest as Mark stepped out. He turned out of the car with his legs together as his face flushed over the prospects of this boy knowing he too was a boy. Another boy came up wearing the same jacket and opened Carol's door before climbing in to park their car. Mark waited for his mother before they climbed the steps. Mark also dropped his eyes as they passed the two goons. A woman, in a conventional maid's uniform, greeted them before they could ring the doorbell and was about to take Mark's purse till he said he'd keep it. He had his lipstick in there and was sure he'd use it at some point. His mother gave her purse up. "Hello. I'm Ms. Rosa Capella, your hostess for today. Come in and I'll have you sign the register and get your name tag." "And you are?" Rose asked. "I'm Carol Evans and this is my son Mark," Carol said, taking Rosa's hand. "Lovely," Rosa said to Mark as she guided them into a spacious living room easily the size of their house it seemed. There was a young girl sitting at a desk as Rose said, "Mark Evans." The young girl picked up a pink name tag shaped in the outline of a little girl in a very full skirt as she wrote in small letters, "Mark Evans." In another marker and in letters much larger added, "Martha. Remember your girl name, sweetie. That's the only name we'll be using today. There are a few girls here already, so why don't I take your mother into the library and you can join the other girls. When everyone has arrived, we will start the birthday party," Rosa said, nodding to Mark as she finished pinning on his name tag. Mark, with a great deal of apprehension, watched his mother walk off before he made his way to the back of the estate. Ralph was there and Steve. Ralph was also wearing a wig that Mark felt grateful over, given that Steve, Tom and Carl were obviously not. Although Carl wore a girl's hairband for his bow. "Hey," Ralph said in a tart, almost harsh, but soft voice. "Hey," Mark answered and did the same when Carl also said hey. Steve simply nodded. Chris and Ken were there, making it a total of 6 boys out of 15. Chris wore his own hair, but it was in a perm of fluffy curls, and Ken simply his own hair like Steve. They too nodded. Mark, to his amazement, decided he was the cutest there. Ahead of Mark was a large tent, as you might see for weddings, only this one in a bubble gum pink and white. There were 4 tables, with a square table set to the left separated by a dance floor of parquet wood. It was 50 feet long and half again as wide, and the chairs were covered in pink satin with giant bows at the back of each. Giant bows were everywhere. "Been in that tent?" Mark whispered to Ralph. "Yes." "You don't want to know," he said. "Why?" Mark asked. "They've got cakes in the shape of all the Disney princess, Snow White, Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, and another one I didn't recognize. All of kinds of snack food, but there are guys in there serving it," Ralph said. "I'm hungry," Mark said for his reason to go in and see what Ralph was talking about. "Wait. If you're going in, so am I," Ralph said, twisting to join with Mark. "What's that over there?" Mark asked, looking at an arbor with a swing and white picket fence set around it. Everything was white but wrapped in artificial flowers. "For our pictures, I was told," Ralph said. "Oh," Mark said, feeling excited but trying not to show it. The both walked through the chiffon curtains tied back with large bows. Mark noted the name tags on the table decorated with Alice in Wonderland and their girl names. Mark saw the name Martha, his name, next to Robin, and Ralph was wearing the name Robin. 2 young men dressed the same as the young men parking cars stood behind the table, standing comfortably at ease. Both simply watched the 2 boys as Mark asked, "Do they know we're boys?" "Hello?" Ralph said. "Right, I suppose they do," Mark said, moving to the table of food. It was a delightful assortment of cut meats, pasta, and snacks that could have fed an army. Mark picked up a cloth napkin and small snack dish. He wasn't super hungry, but he told Ralph, or rather Robin, he was. Mark saw the cakes by the punch on a separate table, also covered in satin. The cakes were shaped like girls standing in full gowns. "This is wild," Mark whispered as he made his way down the table. Ralph followed close behind. That's a word, Ralph said. Think everyone will show? Mark asked. Only if they are smart, Ralph said sarcastically as he picked up things to add to his plate. Meanwhile, Carol and Rosa entered a library nearly as big as that living room. Don Venuto, this is fabulous, Carol said as she and he took each other's hand. Ralph's mother was there sitting with Steve's mother and across from two other women Carol knew to be the mothers of Mark's classmates. And how is your son doing? Don Venuto asked. Actually, he's faring rather well. Scared to death of you as the godfather, obviously. I think that rumor of the man floating in the river is most of it, Carol said. Poor man. A suicide, I'm told. Fortunately, it happened just as we started this. My attorney and friend DiMazzo suggested it would lend some credibility to our story if we played it up that he was one of my sodders, Don Venuto said. Well, it worked, Carol said. I'm happy for that. Listen, I really can't thank you enough for doing this. I know it's a bit extreme, but again, I thought that if the other boys can experience a bit of femininity, they would be less likely to tease my son when he finally makes his announcement. It really wouldn't have worked if you and the other mothers had decided otherwise, Don Venuto said. Actually, the pleasure is all mine. I can't remember when I've had this much fun, Carol said and asked Rosa, so what is on the agenda? Strictly sugar and spice and everything nice. I'm going to have them get their snack food, sit and explain our program, then just do a number of things to heighten their state if not their minds. Picture taking, some practicing on being little girls, then some games. I'll announce what Mario is going to be doing then. We should have the cakes around 3, Rosa said. That birthday theme was really a good idea, Carol said. I thought so too. I mean, with Mario announcing his transition from male to female today, it really is a birthday of sorts. Of course, the little girl's birthday party theme worked for the boys out there as well, Rosa said. Agreed, Carol noted. May I offer you some tea? Don Venuto asked as a woman came up wearing a red jacket. Yes, that would be lovely, Carol said and asked, Don, where did you get those men you used to hand out the invitations? That was absolutely brilliant. I mean, they scared me and I knew better. Actors. My sister Rosa found them. Isn't she amazing? She'd organized this whole thing for me, Don said, smiling at Rosa. And where's Mario? Carol asked. Upstairs with his mother dressing still. This is his first time as a girl in front of the other boys and he's nervous as a cat. He's changed his dress at least 3 times so far, Don said. But he's still going to go ahead and announce his transition? Carol asked. Oh yes. He's really very excited about that part, but, like I said, he's very nervous. Don noted and added, it's been a difficult road for him so far, but we're hoping he's coming up to the end of it. And when does he actually have the operation? Carol asked. That's set for his 18th birthday. He's got about 9 months still, but with his transition starting today, as it were, he no longer has to hide this part of himself, so that's a real big plus, Don noted. Oh, and I fell in love with your store, Carol said. Thank you. We've just opened another about an hour's drive from here. We've got 3 now and they seem to be catching on. I'm considering another, but we're not sure yet, Don said. Well, I'm not sure if my son is ever going to shop there again, but that dress he got is adorable, Carol noted. Thank you. That was my pleasure. They really are pure sugar and spice, and that's a fact, Don said. 3 other mothers appeared just then with the maid ushering them in. Carol recognized Jack's mother and waved. Jack's mother waved back. Carol took Dawn's hand again, then moved off towards the other women, sitting and discussing how their boys were faring so far. Well, my Ralph doesn't want anyone to know this, obviously, but he's enjoying this, Sandy said as Carol walked over. She looked at Carol, nodded and added, "So how is your Mark doing?" "Are you kidding? He loves it," Carol said and added, "Hated it at first, but by the time we left that store he was willing to stay dressed. Met a girl that did his nails yesterday. I gave him a nightgown last night and he wore it to bed. Gave me goosebumps. My John was the same way. Threw a fit the whole time till he stepped into the panties. You would have thought I'd given him a sedative or something," Susan noted. The other mothers nodded to what was said. "Jack's here," Mark said to Ralph as another very cute-looking girl complete with wig walked into the tent. Jack was more animated than the rest of the boys as he walked up to Ralph and Mark. "Hey," Jack said. "Hey," Mark and Ralph answered. "This is too much," Jack said. "Slightly," Ralph said. "Big time," Mark added, looking at Jack's dress. Jack's name tag read Janet. "My sister's stuff," Jack said as he took up the skirt with a delicate touch and a smile as he added, "She was this size when she was 7 or so." "Cute," Mark said, forgetting for a moment that he was among his classmates. "Thanks," Jack said, also not paying any attention to convention. Both boys smiled at each other. "You guys like what you're wearing?" Ralph asked. "Maybe. A little." "Why?" Jack asked. "Just wondering," Ralph asked. "You don't?" Mark asked Ralph. "Didn't at first. Still not sure, but seeing everyone else dressed makes it a little easier." "I guess a little," Ralph said. "Me too," Mark said and added, as he noted a few other boys walking in, that the group had grown. "Looks like almost everyone is here." Music started. Something from one of Disney's movies began playing over the speakers as Rosa walked over to the table set up on the other side of the floor. She tapped the microphone lightly and said, "Ladies, may I have your attention please? If you will find your seats, this can begin. Your girl names are on place cards at the tables." The boys began circling the tables finding their names, and as each did they began sitting. Some, Mark included, sat ladylike, others plopped down in their chairs sitting like boys. Jack sat as Mark had and Ralph tried. "Wow, is that Mario?" Mark asked, watching a very pretty girl walk in with Don Venuto on one side and a stately woman on the other. All of the mothers were following, some holding teacups. There were chairs around the sides of the tents as the mothers began sitting. Some waved at their sons and some of the boys waved back. Mark waved at his mother. "Got to be. That's Don Venuto, I'll bet," Ralph said. "Doesn't look like a gangster," Jack said, looking at the man in his white suit. "I don't think gangsters have a look," Mark said. "Ladies, may I present Mr. and Mrs. Don Venuto and their daughter Maria," Rosa said as Mario and her mother and father took chairs at the table. Rosa paused for a moment and then began again. "As you are obviously aware, this is not an ordinary birthday party. So allow me first to explain some of the reasons you are here. Mario, my nephew, is officially becoming a girl today. This is her first day to become the girl she was born as. She's chosen the name Maria, and you are here to celebrate her first birthday as a girl. It's been a difficult road for her, and some of you have contributed to that difficulty. Our hope for today is that we can step past those days and take this celebration as a new beginning for you as well as for her. With your mother's understanding and support, we fostered this notion of a little girl's birthday party so you could share, at least once in your young lives, some of what Maria has experienced for all of hers. As with most of you here dressed as girls, you're feeling odd because you're not girls. So too my niece Maria, who was never a boy. That's what makes you all, at this moment, the same. And that was the reason we urged your mothers into helping us explain this in this odd sort of way. I hope, as this party unfolds, that you will embrace your own sense of femininity and accept Maria hers. In the meantime, this should be fun for most of you, and I encourage you to enjoy yourselves for the remaining time you are here. We have a photographer available for pictures, and there are gifts for you to take home with you. Don Venuto and his wife, if you're not aware of it, owns the dress shop that most of you shopped in. Those stores, I should note, are his only business, and for the record, the men who delivered your invitations were actors. That poor man who committed suicide was not part of the scheme other than to support the rumors that have been guiding you. Your mothers can tell you the rest of this when the party ends. Meanwhile, eat, play, and enjoy yourselves. Waiters and waitresses began pushing carts in with plates under silver covers as the noise level, almost silent till now, began to climb. Most of it the boys expressing their shock and state with each other. "It's all been a con?" Ralph asked. "Looks like it." Jack noted with a snicker. "Well, I'll be," Mark said in amazement. "And our mothers knew about it?" A boy across from Mark said as he twisted around. He waved at a woman who waved back as he added, "I've just spent the last 2 days dressed the whole time and practicing for this party." "Me too," Mark said, and with a laugh added, "Even had my nails done yesterday." Some of the boys were obviously angry, most not, and a few began laughing as the joke played on them became more apparent. By the time brunch was ending, the boys had become more animated, relaxed, and a few obviously enjoying this time that they had. Mark most of all. Pictures began right as the tables were being cleared. The boys lined up with their mothers for the photographer, who took 2 pictures each, one of the boys sitting on the swing alone and another with their mother standing behind them. They played pin the dress on Cinderella, and Rosa organized a sort of beauty pageant as each boy, some blushing, was brought up by his girl name to be introduced to the other boys. Each boy got a present, which turned out to be a kind of commemorative doll. Sparkle Barbie was the doll, but a small sash had been added to her elegant dress reading today's date. Maria, carrying a pink satin basket, along with her mother and father, moved among the party, handing out pastel-colored candy-coated almonds wrapped in tulle and tied off with ribbons. There were questions, lots of questions, but by 3 o'clock the last of them had been answered. Most of the boys stayed till the party ended. Mark, Ralph, and Jack stood in line to congratulate Maria before they too started to leave. Mark, during one of the games which Rosa organized, had a pink ribbon pinned to his dress after winning the curtsy contest. Ralph wore one after winning the Simon Says for twirling the best. Almost all of the boys wore one sort of ribbon or another by the time the party ended. Mark was silent during the short drive down the driveway to the road. "Well, did you enjoy yourself?" Mark's mother asked. "Yes," Mark said, sad that it had ended. "Me too. It was such a lovely party," Mark's mother noted happily. "So you knew about this all along?" Mark asked. "Afraid so. I didn't know about those goons though, so that threw me off a little, but it was a nice touch," Mark's mother said. "Why?" Mark asked and added, "I mean, why this way?" "Honey, when we first met with Don and his wife Stephanie, it was to discuss Mario's transition and how to handle it for you boys. A boy who is becoming a girl is not a normal day-to-day sort of thing, and there were more than a few of us who were concerned for Mario's sake. He was already a target by some, as you are aware. Anyway, one of the mothers, in a joking way, suggested it would be far easier to explain this to her son if her son had a chance to wear a dress. Sympathy or empathy are powerful tools, she noted. That joke sparked the idea, and before long there was the concept of this party and a way for Mario, or rather Maria, to come out, as it were. Since some of you thought that Don's first name was actually Don, as in the Don or Godfather, it made perfectly good sense to get you to do this under that guise. Fortunately, Mario's mother was opening their newest store and agreed to provide the clothes at no charge, saying it was worth the cost of this for her new daughter's sake. You met Helen, another of his aunts, when we were shopping for your dress. You guys easily bought the rest of it. What we didn't expect, is that some of you would get into it so deeply. Mark's mother said, and added, there were a lot of phone calls and discussions on Friday when you guys were in school about that. Who else got into this? Mark asked. Ralph for one and Jack another. Steve as well, according to his mother. Mark's mother said. Steve was one of the boys that liked teasing Mario. I mean Maria. Mark said. I know. Seems that his teasing is coming from some very similar reasons. I'm not sure of that, and we shouldn't jump to any conclusions either, but obviously Steve may very well have his own coming out party in the future. Mark's mother said. Wow. Mark said. And you? Mark's mother asked. Me? No. I'm kind of happy being a boy, Mom. I mean, you know, for most of the time, I suppose. Mark said, blushing a little. That's what I wanted to hear. Mark's mother said. Really? Mark asked. Really? I wouldn't mind having Martha coming around once in a while. Mark's mother said, turning for a brief second to connect with Mark. I guess I wouldn't either. Mark said softly. How about tomorrow, or is that too soon? Mark's mother said. Tomorrow? Mark asked. We've been invited for brunch by Maria, Dawn, and Stephanie at their country club. Maria has made it very clear that a few of you boys have been very nice to her, and she would like to thank you for that personally before school Monday. She thought a smaller, more private gathering would be nice, Mark's mother said. Dressed? Mark asked. Of course. Mark's mother said, and added, if you want. Sure, I'd like that, Mark said. Anyone else coming that I know? Mark asked. Just Ralph and Jack as far as I know, Mark's mother said. Are they going to come dressed? Mark asked. Yes. Mark's mother said. Is it formal enough for this sort of dress? Mark asked. Already starting to con me into another dress? Mark's mother asked, laughing. No? I mean, I was just wondering if this one might be too fancy? Mark said, fluffing the skirt to his mother's amazement. I think we can find something pretty but a little less special occasion, Mark's mother said. Shopping again? Mark asked. Actually, Tracy says she has a couple of dresses that might be suitable for a Sunday brunch. Mark's mother noted. Tracy? When did you talk with Tracy? Is she in on this now? Mark said with a touch of apprehension in his voice. Talked to her when you were in the middle of that curtsy contest. She slipped me her phone number on our way over. I was to give her a call when this was over, but called when you were doing that curtsy contest. I suppose the answer then is yes. Mark's mother said. So is she. I mean. So is she bringing those things over? Mark asked. Actually, if it's okay with you, she thought we could just stop by and try them on there. Told you I liked that girl, Mark's mother noted. At her house? Mark asked. Sure. Why not? Mark's mother said and added, it's not like she doesn't know. But that's just it, Mom. I mean, she doesn't really know I actually sort of like this, Mark said. Honey, I'm afraid that's not exactly true, Mark's mother said. What? How? Mark asked. Same way I found out, I suppose. She seems very astute to me, Mark's mother said, patting Mark's hand. This is getting a little weird, Mark said. I'm not sure I'm used to it either, but that's some of the attraction, I suppose. Mark's mother said. What is? Mark asked. Having twins, Mark's mother said and added, with one of them being a girl, that is. Mark smiled. Martha smiled as well.